In this video, we're going to be breaking down 3 hours of SpongeBob conspiracies. Let's get started with our first one. In episode SB129, Squidward locks himself in the Krusty Krab freezer to escape SpongeBob and Patrick's jellyfishing invitation, only to wake up 2,000 years in the future where he meets Spongetron, a robot version of SpongeBob with 486 clones. After traveling to the prehistoric past and accidentally teaching caveman SpongeBob how to jellyfish, Squidward gets trapped in a white void dimension called Nowhere before finally returning home. The episode ends with SpongeBob and Patrick revealing that Squidward himself invented jellyfishing, creating a time loop where he caused his own eternal suffering. What sounds like a fun time travel romp is actually the most disturbing episode in the series because it proves SpongeBob has reality warping powers that keep Squidward imprisoned across every timeline, dimension, and era. Squidward can never escape. SpongeBob exists everywhere, always, and the universe itself refuses to let Squidward be alone. The setup tells you everything. Squidward just wants one Sunday morning to practice his clarinet. You know, that thing he's objectively terrible at, making this whole endeavor even sadder. SpongeBob's alarm clock goes off facing out the window like some kind of psychological warfare device, and it literally launches Squidward's clarinet down his throat. This is already cartoon violence turned up to 11, but here's where it gets weird. SpongeBob and Patrick knock on Squidward's door approximately 17 times in rapid succession. Squidward opens and closes that door so many times it becomes a montage. They're relentless. When Squidward finally tells them he'll never be ready, he accidentally locks himself out of his own house, and SpongeBob opens the door from inside. How did SpongeBob get in there? The episode doesn't explain this. SpongeBob has somehow manifested inside Squidward's home without permission, which is either breaking and entering or something far more concerning. SpongeBob might actually be able to materialize wherever Squidward exists. Squidward escapes to the Krusty Krab because it's Sunday and the restaurant is closed. He hides in the freezer when he hears SpongeBob and Patrick searching for him. The freezer door locks from the inside, which is a massive OSHA violation, but whatever, and Squidward assumes someone will find him soon. The French narrator drops the most casual 2,000 years later in television history, and suddenly we're in a chrome dystopia where Spongetron exists. Here's the thing that breaks your brain. Spongetron has clones labeled X, Y, and Z. When Squidward asks if other letters are involved, Spongetron cheerfully announces all 486 of them. The English alphabet has 26 letters. Spongetron is implying the alphabet expanded, merged with other character sets, or most likely, the writers wanted to emphasize how completely SpongeBob has saturated the future. There are nearly 500 SpongeBobs running around in 4017 AD. That's a SpongeBob infestation. That's SpongeBob as an invasive species that has colonized the timeline itself. Spongetron immediately wants to go jellyfishing because, of course, he does. And Patron shows up a two-headed Patrick that somehow still functions as Patrick despite having twice the brain capacity, which mathematically should give him the intelligence of a sea cucumber but apparently doesn't. Squidward begs to go home, and Spongetron directs him to the time machine, down the hall to the left. Squidward tries the wrong door first and gets shredded by a can opener, which the episode treats as a mild inconvenience. He springs back together like a slinky, because apparently Squidward is also immortal in this universe. He jumps into the time machine and heads to the past, figuring if SpongeBob exists in the future, maybe the past is safe. Wrong. So catastrophically wrong. Squidward arrives in prehistoric Bikini Bottom and immediately encounters primate sponge and prehistoric starfish caveman versions of his tormentors. They're terrified of jellyfish and keep torturing themselves by trying to touch them. Squidward, in a moment of what he thinks is helpfulness, read arrogance, teaches them how to jellyfish properly. He crafts nets from their loincloths, demonstrates the technique, and even names the activity. It's called jellyfishing. Congratulations, Squidward. You just created the bootstrap paradox that will define your existence. You taught SpongeBob the one activity he'll use to torture you for millennia. This is the equivalent of going back in time and personally handing your childhood bully the instruction manual on how to bully you. When Squidward tries to play his clarinet, primate sponge and prehistoric starfish go absolutely feral and chase him back into the time machine. He frantically mashes the controls and breaks the lever, causing the machine to malfunction. The word future spins like a slot machine and lands on 2 lemons and a bar, and the machine literally calls Squidward a loser before yeeting him into the void. This is where the episode becomes genuinely unsettling. Squidward ends up in a blank white space with nothing. No ground, no sky, no objects, just endless white emptiness. He's thrilled at first because there's no SpongeBob here. Finally, blessed isolation. Then reality starts breaking down. Squidward shrinks. Multiple voices echo alone in a demonic chorus. Strange audio distortions play. The camera keeps zooming in and out. Squidward runs in place, moving off screen and back on screen in the same spot because there's literally nowhere to go. This dimension has no SpongeBob, which means it also has no structure, no meaning, no purpose. The universe cannot function without SpongeBob in it. Squidward has a breakdown and starts sobbing. He says he misses Bikini Bottom, his Easter Island head, and critically SpongeBob. The exact moment he says SpongeBob, the time machine reappears and takes him home. The machine only responds to SpongeBob's name. Squidward has to verbally acknowledge his need for SpongeBob before reality allows him to leave. When he returns, SpongeBob and Patrick are standing in the exact same spot spot outside his house, still waiting for him. They haven't moved. Time has passed. Squidward has lived through what felt like hours or days of temporal chaos, and these two are frozen in place like NPCs waiting for their quest to activate. When Squidward asks who invented jellyfishing, they cheerfully tell him, "You are Squidward," confirming the time loop is closed and Squidward's suffering is infinite and self-inflicted. The implications wreck everything. SpongeBob exists in the prehistoric past, the present, and 2,000 years in the future with 486 clones. The only dimension without SpongeBob is a maddening void that reality itself rejects. The time machine obeys SpongeBob's name. Squidward cannot escape through time, space, or dimensional travel. SpongeBob is omnipresent. This explains every episode in the series. Whenever Squidward moves away, SpongeBob follows. When Squidward tries to have one good day, SpongeBob appears. SpongeBob survives explosions, disintegration, and death because he's woven into the fabric of reality. Squidward is trapped in SpongeBob's universe, and the show has spent 25 years documenting one cephalopod's futile attempts to escape his reality-warping neighbor. That's cosmic horror disguised as a kid's cartoon. That's The Truman Show meets Lovecraft. Squidward figured it out in SB-129, tried to escape, and learned the truth. There is no escape. SpongeBob is eternal, infinite, and inescapable. Sweet dreams, kids. Now let's move on to the next conspiracy. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, SpongeBob gets passed over for the Krusty Krab 2 manager position in favor of Squidward because Mr. Krabs thinks he's too much of a kid. Devastated, SpongeBob drowns his sorrows at Goofy Goober's ice cream party boat with Patrick, getting completely wasted on triple gooberberry sunrises until they pass out. The next morning, they wake up hungover and late, just in time to witness King Neptune accusing Mr. Krabs of stealing his crown. SpongeBob volunteers to retrieve the crown from Shell City to save Mr. Krabs' life, embarking on a 6-day road trip with Patrick. What seems like a silly kids movie about ice cream and friendship is actually documenting SpongeBob and Patrick's membership in a death cult that worships a giant sentient peanut and prepares its followers for alien abduction, through ritualistic ice cream consumption and indoctrination. The evidence is overwhelming, the parallels to real-world cults are disturbing, and SpongeBob literally admits on camera that they worship the Goofy Goober. This is Heaven's Gate with sprinkles on top. The movie opens with SpongeBob dreaming about becoming manager of the Krusty Krab 2, complete with a wall of 374 consecutive Employee of the Month awards proving his dedication. That's over 31 years of perfect performance, which is either impressive or concerning, depending on whether you think SpongeBob ages. When Mr. Krabs announces Squidward as the new manager instead, calling SpongeBob just a kid, SpongeBob walks away muttering, "I'm ready." Depression, in the saddest character moment this show has ever produced. He's devastated. His entire identity revolves around working at the Krusty Krab, and the one thing he wanted most just got ripped away. Patrick tries to cheer him up by reminding him about their plans to party at Goofy Goober's ice cream party boat, and they immediately start singing the Goofy Goober anthem while wearing branded merchandise. They're already indoctrinated. This is established cult behavior before the ice cream even enters the equation. SpongeBob initially tries to go home because he's too depressed to celebrate, but Patrick convinces him to stay with the promise of a triple gooberberry sunrise. Here's where things get dark. SpongeBob and Patrick proceed to drink themselves into oblivion on ice cream. They're slamming sundaes like college freshmen at a keg party. The waiter keeps bringing them more triple gooberberry sunrises, and they keep chugging them down, covering the waiter in ice cream residue like he's working at the worst Hooters in Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob eventually gets so drunk he staggers onto the stage, dedicates a song to Patrick and this big peanut guy, and they all pass out together. The next morning, SpongeBob wakes up looking like he survived a frat house apocalypse, and the waiter has to physically shake him awake because he wants to go home. SpongeBob is 8 in the morning drunk. That's alcoholic territory, except it's ice cream, which somehow makes it worse because kids are the target demographic. The Goofy Goober worship gets explicitly confirmed during the road trip. When SpongeBob and Patrick encounter the Thug Tug, a biker bar for underwater criminals where bubble blowing is punishable by group beatings, they accidentally blow bubbles in the bathroom and nearly get murdered for it. Victor, the bartender, announces the rule. All bubble-blowing babies will be beaten senseless by every able-bodied patron in the bar. To identify the bubble blowers, Victor plays the Goofy Goober theme song as a test, knowing that no baby can resist singing along. SpongeBob and Patrick struggle desperately to stay silent while surrounded by violent thugs, visibly shaking with the effort of suppressing their Pavlovian response to the song. This is MK Ultra level conditioning. They've been so thoroughly brainwashed by Goofy Goober propaganda that hearing the jingle triggers an involuntary compulsion to sing along, even when their lives depend on staying quiet. The song functions as a mind control activation phrase, and SpongeBob and Patrick almost die because they physically cannot stop themselves from worshipping the peanut. The cult's grip on them becomes undeniable later when they reach the monster trench and SpongeBob has his breakdown. He lists all the reasons they're just kids. We blow bubbles, we eat ice cream, we worship a dancing peanut for corn's sake. That's a direct quote. SpongeBob admits they worship the Goofy Goober. Patrick initially tries to deny it, we do not worship him, but immediately realizes SpongeBob is right. When SpongeBob pulls down Patrick's shorts to reveal Goofy Goober peanut party underwear that Patrick has been wearing for 3 years straight, Patrick breaks down crying and admits, "You're right, SpongeBob. We are kids." The underwear is cult merchandise. Patrick has been wearing the same pair for 3 years, which is disgusting on multiple levels, but more importantly suggests he owns multiple pairs or wears them exclusively. That's cultist devotion to branded materials. He's literally wearing his faith. The final proof comes during SpongeBob's climactic rock concert inside the Krusty Krab 2. When Plankton has enslaved everyone with bucket helmets and SpongeBob needs to break the mind control, he channels the power of Goofy Goober rock to save the day. He transforms into a wizard covered in peanut imagery, plays an electric guitar with good game on the headstock, and blasts everyone's helmets off while singing an extended version of the Goofy Goober anthem. The Goofy Goober cult conditioning is so powerful that it overrides Plankton's technological mind control. SpongeBob defeats a totalitarian dictator using the psychological warfare techniques he learned from worshipping an ice cream mascot. The cult saved the day, which is either inspirational or horrifying depending on your perspective. Probably both. Here's what makes this genuinely unsettling. Real cults use the exact same tactics. They target vulnerable people during emotional crises. SpongeBob, after losing the promotion, offer community and comfort. Patrick taking him to their special place. Create powerful group rituals, singing the anthem together. Distribute branded merchandise to reinforce identity. The hats, the underwear, and establish psychological triggers that override rational thought. The song's compulsive effect. The ice cream functions as both literal intoxicant and symbolic sacrament. SpongeBob and Patrick get drunk on it, pass out, wake up hungover, and immediately return to Goofy Goobers at the end of the movie for another round. They're addicts. The movie ends with SpongeBob becoming manager of the Krusty Krab 2, while remaining a devoted Goofy Goober cultist, suggesting you can maintain normal life while being fully indoctrinated. That's the scariest part. The cult doesn't destroy your life. It just becomes your life. SpongeBob and Patrick will worship that dancing peanut until the aliens come, and they'll do it with smiles on their faces. Okay, let's head into the next conspiracy. In episode Patrick's Smart Pants, Patrick falls off a cliff while playing tag with SpongeBob, and his head pops clean off his body. SpongeBob panics and finds a starfish-shaped head nearby, reattaching it without realizing he grabbed brain coral from the brain coral field instead of Patrick's actual head. Patrick immediately transforms into a genius who speaks with an expanded vocabulary, understands advanced music theory, solves complex mathematical equations, and conducts scientific research. After alienating everyone with his newfound intelligence, including SpongeBob, who he calls Robert and tells they've grown apart, Patrick realizes he misses his old life. He voluntarily jumps off the same cliff to recreate the accident, discovers SpongeBob attached the wrong head, and makes a conscious decision to return to his original state. When SpongeBob asks if he's sure about giving up being smart and sophisticated, Patrick delivers the most chilling line in the entire series. "Knowledge can never replace friendship. I prefer to be an idiot." He then removes the brain coral himself and lets SpongeBob reattach his old head. Patrick's stupidity is a deliberate lifestyle choice. He's capable of genius-level intelligence and actively maintains his idiocy, because being smart brings isolation, responsibility, and expectations he refuses to deal with. Patrick has been weaponizing his stupidity for the entire series. The setup reveals everything about Patrick's capabilities. The moment SpongeBob reattaches the brain coral head, Patrick's internal mechanism activates like a computer, booting up the transcript, describes a plug plugging into an outlet with gears and cranks, starting up. Patrick gets a spark from his head and immediately starts speaking differently. His first words as Smart Patrick are, "I find all this laughter to be highly illogical," which sounds like Spock having a bad day. When SpongeBob hands him a jellyfish net, Patrick sketches a Leonardo da Vinci-style technical drawing of a jellyfish instead of catching it, explaining that it is wrong to harness nature in such a barbaric manner. Within minutes of becoming intelligent, Patrick has mastered scientific observation, artistic technique, environmental ethics, and formal speech patterns. This instantaneous transformation proves Patrick's brain has always been capable of processing complex information. The hardware was always there, he just chose to keep it unplugged. Smart Patrick's abilities escalate rapidly and reveal knowledge that goes beyond what Brain Coral should provide. He identifies Squidward's clarinet piece as Cornelius Pufferfish's Opus 67, Symphony in Blue, and suggests Squidward add a little fortissimo on the arpeggiated B-flat scale during the 7th bar of the Adagio Andante. That's conservatory-level music theory. Patrick can read musical notation, understand compositional structure, and provide expert critique. He studies plankton under a microscope, while plankton screams, "I'll show you subspecies," from the slide. He solves Sandy's mathematical equations by changing the literal term to a coefficient so the minuend will achieve the desired quotient, then insults her intelligence by calling her impaired instead of dumb, because he prefers a more sophisticated word. Patrick masters multiple academic disciplines instantly, which suggests his brain already contained this information or the capacity to access it. The coral acts as an activation switch, revealing Patrick's true potential. The isolation hits Patrick immediately and becomes unbearable. Smart Patrick tells SpongeBob they're just compatible anymore, and it's time we went our separate ways. He calls SpongeBob Robert and Mr. SquarePants, like they're business acquaintances instead of best friends. When SpongeBob cries and says, "You're my best friend," Patrick responds with, "I know it's hard, but brace up, chap," like he's firing an employee. SpongeBob walks away sobbing, while Patrick goes to Sandy's tree dome, where they bond over intellectual pursuits until Patrick insults Sandy's intelligence and gets kicked out. Patrick ends up sitting alone in his house, saying, surrounded by knowledge and no one to share it with. No one I can call friend. He looks at his photo album titled, "My Friend SpongeBob," and starts crying over memories of their friendship. Smart Patrick spends the entire episode systematically destroying every relationship he has because intelligence creates barriers between people. He becomes condescending, judgmental, and isolated. This is the wake-up call. Patrick's response proves everything. He doesn't accept his new reality. He doesn't try to find other smart friends or pursue his intellectual interests. Patrick immediately dedicates his genius-level intelligence to solving one problem: getting his old life back. He studies x-rays of his and SpongeBob's heads, meditates on top of his rock, observes Squidward's behavior, reads extensively, and conducts chemical experiments, including one that makes hair grow on his head. His eyes become bloodshot from exhaustion. Patrick applies the scientific method to friendship restoration, asking, what could it be? What's different? When he can't figure it out through research, he kidnaps SpongeBob in a jellyfish net and forces them to do fun activities together. They ride shells down mountains and crash into sand. Patrick asks, "When did the fun go away, SpongeBob?" And SpongeBob explains it disappeared, when you jumped off that cliff and knocked your head clean off. Patrick immediately understands. Here's where it gets disturbing. Patrick deliberately jumps off the same cliff to duplicate my actions from that day to ascertain the origin of my change. He's attempting to traumatically brain himself back to stupidity. SpongeBob pulls him out of the ground and discovers Patrick is headless again. While searching for Patrick's head, SpongeBob finds it in the brain coral field and realizes his mistake. Brain coral. No wonder you got so smart, buddy. He retrieves Patrick's original head and asks the critical question, "Are you sure you want to give up being smart and sophisticated to be my friend again?" Patrick's response is unambiguous. Knowledge can never replace friendship. I prefer to be an idiot. That's an active verb. Prefer. Choice. Intention. Patrick voluntarily removes the brain coral himself. SpongeBob doesn't do it for him and allows his original head to be reattached. The moment it connects, Patrick returns to his baseline personality, burps, and says, "Hi, SpongeBob." They hug and run off with jellyfish nets into the sunset. The implications wreck the entire series. Patrick proved he's capable of mastering music theory, advanced mathematics, scientific research, and sophisticated communication within hours. His stupidity is performance art. Every dumb question, every confused moment, every ridiculous mistake, all of it is deliberate. Patrick lives under a rock with zero responsibilities, zero job, zero bills, and zero expectations because he's engineered the perfect consequence-free existence. When he does something stupid, people excuse it because that's just Patrick. When he causes disasters, he faces minimal repercussions because everyone assumes he's too dumb to know better. His intelligence would bring responsibilities he refuses to accept. The episode proves Patrick values friendship and comfort over achievement and recognition, which sounds noble until you realize he's essentially choosing to be a professional mooch. Patrick has weaponized learned helplessness. He's the underwater equivalent of someone who pretends they can't work the washing machine so someone else does their laundry forever. SpongeBob lost his best friend for 2 days and cried himself sick while Patrick played genius. And Patrick's takeaway was being smart is lonely, so I'll go back to being dumb. That's sociopathic levels of self-awareness combined with zero desire to grow. Patrick looked at personal development and said, "No thanks, I'm good. Respect the commitment, I guess." Alright, let's move on to the next conspiracy. And if you're enjoying the video so far, subscribe to our channel. In episode SpongeBob's Last Stand, the city of Bikini Bottom announces construction of the Shelly Superhighway, a massive infrastructure project designed to connect the town to other areas and boost economic development. The highway will cut directly through jellyfish fields, destroying the jellyfish habitat. SpongeBob immediately organizes a protest movement, recruits followers from across Bikini Bottom, leads them in civil disobedience against construction crews, physically blockades bulldozers and equipment, and refuses to back down even when facing legal consequences and community opposition. The episode frames this as heroic environmental activism, but what it actually documents is SpongeBob's transformation into a radicalized eco-terrorist who uses cult manipulation tactics, organizes militant resistance, and prioritizes his jellyfish obsession over community progress and economic development. This isn't his first act of environmental extremism, it's just the most organized. SpongeBob has spent the entire series committing acts of sabotage, trespassing, assault, and property destruction in the name of protecting nature, all while hiding behind a facade of childlike innocence. He's the underwater Unabomber, and nobody's noticed because he wears square pants and works at a burger joint. The setup reveals SpongeBob's instant radicalization. The moment the Shelly Superhighway construction is announced, SpongeBob doesn't engage with the democratic process, doesn't attend city council meetings to voice concerns, doesn't work within the system to find compromise solutions like wildlife corridors or habitat preservation zones. He immediately jumps to direct action and protest. SpongeBob organizes a full-scale resistance movement complete with signs, chants, and coordinated messaging. He recruits Patrick, Sandy, Squidward, and dozens of other Bikini Bottom citizens to join his cause. This is community organizing on a massive scale, which requires leadership skills, persuasive communication, and strategic planning abilities. SpongeBob has been hiding under his "I'm just a simple fry cook" persona. He's been waiting for the right cause to activate his inner revolutionary, and Jellyfish Fields is his Alamo. SpongeBob's tactics escalate immediately into civil disobedience and property interference. He leads his followers directly into the construction zone to physically block the equipment. They form human chains in front of bulldozers, chain themselves to machinery, and refuse to move when ordered by construction workers and presumably law enforcement. This is textbook eco-terrorism strategy. Make the project so expensive and time-consuming that developers abandon it. SpongeBob is deliberately sabotaging private property and public infrastructure projects. When authorities try to remove the protesters, SpongeBob doubles down instead of backing off. He wants total shutdown of the highway project, and he's willing to break laws to achieve it. The episode treats this as admirable determination, but in reality, SpongeBob is leading an organized criminal conspiracy to halt legal construction through illegal interference. The cult-like manipulation becomes obvious when you examine how SpongeBob recruits and maintains his followers. He uses emotional appeals rather than rational arguments, framing the highway as an existential threat to jellyfish instead of engaging with legitimate questions about economic development, traffic safety, or community needs. SpongeBob's rhetoric is purely emotional. The jellyfish are innocent, they'll lose their homes, we have to protect them. He never acknowledges that jellyfish are non-sentient animals without complex social structures, or that Jellyfish Fields is enormous and the highway would only impact a small section, or that Bikini Bottom citizens might benefit from improved transportation infrastructure. SpongeBob creates an us versus them mentality, where anyone supporting the highway is evil and anyone opposing it is righteous. That's cult leader behavior. He's exploiting people's emotions to build his movement, and his followers don't question him because he's positioned himself as the pure-hearted defender of nature. Nobody suspects the happy sponge in SquarePants is actually a manipulative extremist. This episode isn't SpongeBob's first act of environmental terrorism, it's just his most organized. Throughout the series, SpongeBob has committed countless acts of sabotage, assault, and property destruction in the name of protecting jellyfish and marine life. In Jellyfish Hunter, SpongeBob breaks into the Jellyfish Jelly Factory, destroys Plankton's industrial equipment, and releases all captured jellyfish that's breaking and entering, destruction of private property, and theft of inventory. In I'm Your Biggest Fanatic, SpongeBob physically attacks Kevin the Sea Cucumber for mistreating jellyfish, escalating to violence against someone who annoyed him. In Nature Pants, SpongeBob abandons civilization entirely to live with jellyfish in the wild, rejecting human society for his nature cult. In Dying for Pie, SpongeBob's obsession with jellyfish nearly gets him killed when he prioritizes jellyfishing over his own safety. In The Pink Purloiner, SpongeBob accuses Patrick of stealing his jellyfish net, and their friendship nearly ends over jellyfish equipment. SpongeBob's relationship with jellyfish isn't a hobby, it's a religious devotion that overrides reason, safety, and law. The lifestyle choices support the eco-terrorist profile. SpongeBob lives in a pineapple, a naturally occurring fruit structure requiring zero construction or environmental impact. He works a low-wage service job despite demonstrating advanced skills in multiple episodes, suggesting he's deliberately chosen economic simplicity over career advancement. He walks or bubbles everywhere instead of using vehicles. He owns minimal possessions. This is voluntary simplicity, a common practice among environmental radicals who believe modern consumerism destroys the planet. SpongeBob has structured his entire existence around minimal environmental footprint while maintaining maximum freedom to pursue his jellyfish activism. He's chosen poverty as an ethical stance. That's ideological commitment, and it's been consistent across 25 years of the show. The childlike innocence is the perfect cover. SpongeBob's high-pitched voice, goofy laugh, and enthusiastic personality make him seem harmless, but that appearance lets him get away with behavior that would get anyone else arrested. When SpongeBob breaks into buildings, people assume he's lost or confused. When he destroys property, people assume it's an accident. When he organizes protests and blockades infrastructure, people assume he's being naive rather than strategic. SpongeBob's persona is the perfect disguise for a radical activist because nobody suspects the town idiot is actually a sophisticated manipulator with strongly held extremist beliefs. Ted Kaczynski lived in a cabin and mailed bombs while looking like a harmless hermit. SpongeBob lives in a pineapple and commits eco-sabotage while looking like a friendly cartoon character. Same energy, different aesthetic. The implications wreck everything. SpongeBob has spent decades building trust in Bikini Bottom while secretly operating as an environmental extremist willing to break laws, destroy property, and manipulate others for his cause. He's prioritized jellyfish literal invertebrates with no capacity for suffering or complex thought over human fish, economic development, safety, and prosperity. SpongeBob's last stand proves he's willing to organize mass movements and engage in coordinated illegal activity when his ideology is threatened. The show has been documenting the radicalization and criminal activities of an eco-terrorist for 25 years, packaging it as wholesome children's entertainment. SpongeBob isn't the hero. He's the villain wearing a smile, and Bikini Bottom is too charmed by his personality to notice they're being led by an extremist who values jellyfish over people. Sleep tight, kids. Your favorite cartoon character is 3 bad days away from chaining himself to a tree and mailing manifestos to the Bikini Bottom Times. Let's keep it going and move on to the next conspiracy. In episode Rock Bottom, SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally board the wrong bus after leaving Glove World and end up in Rock Bottom, a dark, creepy town at the bottom of a 90-degree angle cliff where the residents speak with raspberries between their words and the bathrooms are marked with upside-down question marks. Patrick catches the first bus back to Bikini Bottom, leaving SpongeBob stranded. SpongeBob then spends the entire episode trying to catch a bus home, but every single attempt fails through increasingly improbable timing. He misses buses while tying his shoe, chasing his balloon, getting candy from a vending machine, and even when disguising himself as a bench. After waiting in line as person 329 at the bus station, he's told the last bus already left. SpongeBob is finally rescued when Bert, a strange native creature, ties a balloon to his wrist and floats him up and out of Rock Bottom. What seems like a comedy of errors is actually cosmic horror. Rock Bottom is a sentient predatory dimension that actively hunts visitors and conspires to trap them forever. Every unlucky coincidence is the town itself manipulating reality to prevent escape. The buses are controlled by Rock Bottom. The timing is impossible. Only natives can help you leave, and they have to do it by going up away from the town's gravitational pull. SpongeBob almost became permanent prey. The setup reveals Rock Bottom's hunting strategy immediately. SpongeBob and Patrick board the bus and everything seems normal until they pass the "You are now leaving Bikini Bottom" sign. Patrick misreads it as "You are now in leaving Bikini Bottom," which is adorable stupidity, but also foreshadowing you don't leave Rock Bottom once you enter. The bus drives down a 90-degree angle cliff, which is physically impossible underwater. There's no up or down in the ocean. It's 3-dimensional space, suggesting Rock Bottom exists in a different dimensional plane. SpongeBob and Patrick get thrown around the bus from the gravitational shift. When they arrive, the bus driver immediately kicks them out and drives away before they can ask for help. The driver knows. He delivered fresh prey to Rock Bottom and got out as fast as possible. SpongeBob picks up soil to examine it, and the soil talks, "Would you mind putting me down?" proving the entire location is alive and sentient. Rock Bottom isn't a town. It's an organism, The bus timing becomes impossible to explain through coincidence. SpongeBob stands at the bus stop and ties his shoe. The transcript specifically notes he puts his foot on the sign, ties his shoe using the over, under, and over, and loop-de-loop method, and during that exact sequence, the bus arrives and leaves without him noticing. That's suspicious, but explainable. Then his balloon blows away. He chases it, and another bus arrives and leaves during the chase. Then he needs candy. He walks to the vending machine across the street, and while he's getting his quarter out, another bus arrives and leaves. He runs back and decides to wait. His stomach growls. He checks for buses multiple times, walks to the machine, checks again, inserts the quarter, and the instant the candy drops to the bottom, a bus arrives and leaves. Then the sequence becomes overtly supernatural. Every time SpongeBob reaches for the candy in the machine, a bus drives forward. When he pulls his arm away, the bus drives backward. The bus is responding to his movements in real time. That's active hunting behavior. Rock Bottom is toying with him like a cat playing with a mouse. SpongeBob's desperate attempts to outsmart the buses prove they're not operating on normal logic. He creates a cardboard cutout of himself at the candy machine as a decoy, then waits at the bus stop. A bus arrives, notices the cardboard SpongeBob, then notices the real SpongeBob at the stop, and drives off anyway. The bus recognized the trap and refused to pick him up. SpongeBob disguises himself as a bus stop bench. A bus arrives, examines him, realizes it's SpongeBob in disguise, and leaves. Buses don't have eyes. Buses don't make decisions. These aren't vehicles, they're extensions of Rock Bottom's will. The town is using the buses as hunting tools, deliberately avoiding SpongeBob to keep him trapped until he gives up and integrates into the population. When SpongeBob finally goes to the bus station, he discovers hundreds of residents in line. He's 329th in line. An egg hatches 3 babies who cut in front of him, keeping him at 329. Time speeds up and the line moves, but he remains 329. Rock Bottom is manipulating queue position to delay him. The window attendant encounter confirms the trap. SpongeBob finally reaches the window after waiting for hours and asks when the next bus to Bikini Bottom arrives. The attendant claims he can't understand SpongeBob's accent, forcing SpongeBob to adopt the raspberry speech pattern. After SpongeBob asks in the correct way, the attendant says next bus leaves in 5 seconds, and immediately a bus drives away. The attendant knew SpongeBob would arrive at that exact moment and timed the conversation to make him miss the bus by seconds. Then he announces that's the last one till morning and closes the window, trapping SpongeBob in Rock Bottom overnight. This is coordinated behavior. The attendant is part of the system. Everyone in Rock Bottom works together to trap outsiders. When SpongeBob is left alone in the dark, he says, "This isn't your average everyday darkness. This is advanced darkness." That's not a joke. Rock Bottom's darkness is weaponized. It's denser, heavier, more oppressive than normal darkness. SpongeBob's glove light breaks immediately, as if the darkness consumed it. The only escape comes from a native, and it requires going up. Bert, the weird creature SpongeBob met earlier, finds him and ties the balloon to his wrist. Bert then inflates the balloon larger and larger until SpongeBob floats UP the 90-degree angle cliff and escapes Rock Bottom's dimensional gravity well. Bert says you're welcome in perfect English, with no raspberries, proving the speech pattern is an affectation. Rock Bottom forces on outsiders to mark them as prey. Bert helped SpongeBob escape by literally removing him from Rock Bottom's physical space. You can't leave by bus because the buses are controlled by the town. You can't walk out because the geography doesn't work. The only escape is vertical ascension away from the predatory dimension. SpongeBob floats past the entering Rock Bottom sign on the way up, proving he's leaving the town's territory. The balloon pops only after he's safely in Bikini Bottom airspace. The final shot shows Patrick riding a bus back down to Rock Bottom, saying, "Don't worry, SpongeBob, I'm coming back for ya." Patrick is about to get trapped. The episode ends before we see what happens, but Patrick never mentions this adventure again in the series, suggesting either he escaped immediately or the memory was erased. The implications destroy everything. Rock Bottom has never been mentioned or revisited in over 20 years of SpongeBob episodes, despite being one of the most memorable locations. SpongeBob goes everywhere: Atlantis, the surface, the past, the future, other dimensions, but never returns to Rock Bottom. That's because he's terrified. Rock Bottom hunts visitors using psychological warfare and impossible timing. It's a predatory ecosystem that feeds on trapped travelers who eventually give up and join the population of raspberry-speaking residents. Every weird background character, incidental fish, who appears randomly throughout the series without explanation. They escaped from Rock Bottom, or they're scouts looking for new prey. The town is alive, sentient, and malevolent. SpongeBob figured it out while trapped in the advanced darkness and swore never to return. Patrick is too dumb to realize the danger. Rock Bottom is still down there, waiting at the bottom of that 90-degree angle cliff, watching buses deliver fresh victims who think they're just lost tourists. Sweet dreams, travelers. Now we're rolling into the next conspiracy. In episode I Had an Accident, SpongeBob goes sandboarding down Sand Mountain with Patrick and Sandy, loses control while showing off, and crashes into the ground so hard his butt shatters into tiny pieces. The doctor spends 20 hours reassembling it with staples and a glue stick, then warns SpongeBob that one more injury like that will land him in the iron butt, a medieval torture device for permanent injury victims. Terrified, SpongeBob develops completely rational survival instincts and refuses to leave his house ever again. Sandy and Patrick call him crazy, mock his isolation, and spend the entire episode trying to drag him outside to prove there's nothing to be afraid of. The moment SpongeBob finally steps outside to save his friends from danger, a live-action gorilla appears out of nowhere underwater, beats everyone unconscious with a sack and chair, then literally rips SpongeBob in half. SpongeBob's paranoia was 100% justified. The universe of Bikini Bottom is actively hostile, random catastrophic violence happens constantly for no reason, and SpongeBob's trademark optimism isn't innocence or naivety, it's a psychological coping mechanism for living in a nightmare world where horrific injuries are daily occurrences. Every time SpongeBob shows appropriate fear, he gets mocked for it, and every time he gets mocked for it, something terrible immediately proves him right. The setup establishes that SpongeBob's injury wasn't a freak accident, it was catastrophically severe. The doctor shows SpongeBob an x-ray and explains it took 20 hours to put his butt back together. 20 hours. That's not a simple fracture. SpongeBob's gluteus maximus was shattered into so many pieces they ran out of medical staples and had to use a glue stick. His butt is now held together with office supplies. The doctor calls him a lucky luck boy, which is medical speak for you should absolutely be dead right now. Then the doctor points to Tom sitting in the iron butt, a giant mechanical prison that encases his entire posterior and warns that one more injury will put SpongeBob in there permanently. Tom immediately complains, "Man, it itches," confirming this is a lifetime sentence of torture. The doctor isn't exaggerating for effect. He's giving SpongeBob a legitimate medical warning that his body cannot survive another impact like that. SpongeBob's response is completely rational. Develop safety protocols to prevent further injury. SpongeBob immediately encounters proof that the outside world is dangerous. He walks outside the hospital and sees Harold approaching from behind. SpongeBob screams, "Stay away from the backside. I'm warning you," which Harold considers weird behavior. But here's the thing, SpongeBob is right to be paranoid. Football players are slapping each other's butts. Jimmy is crawling through a 7-mile spanking machine where people take turns hitting his butt while he screams in pain. Squidward asks if this is where the line starts, meaning Squidward wants to participate in ritualized butt violence. SpongeBob isn't paranoid, he's observant. Bikini Bottom culture involves constant physical assault disguised as recreation. SpongeBob runs home screaming, "My butt is not safe out here, no part of me is safe," and he's absolutely correct. The episode frames this as irrational fear, but SpongeBob just witnessed organized spanking leagues operating in broad daylight. That's a society with normalized violence. SpongeBob's isolation strategy is extremely reasonable given the circumstances. He sits in the middle of his floor with a penny, a potato chip, and a used napkin as companions, explaining he's decided to never leave his house again, because that accident made me realize that it's dangerous out there. Sandy calls this crazy talk, but SpongeBob counters with perfectly sound logic. Next time it won't just be my butt. It'll be my armpit or my forehead. He's correctly identified that injuries in Bikini Bottom aren't limited to specific body parts. Catastrophic harm can happen anywhere, anytime, for any reason. When Sandy asks how he'll keep his job, SpongeBob reveals he's already engineered a solution. A spatula so long it reaches all the way to the Krusty Krab from inside his house. That's adaptive problem solving. SpongeBob has assessed the risk, determined that going outside exponentially increases his chance of permanent injury or death, and restructured his entire life to eliminate that risk. That's what rational people do when faced with genuine threats. Sandy and Patrick spend the entire episode trying to gaslight SpongeBob into ignoring his survival instincts. They jellyfish outside his window to make him jealous. They sing him a birthday song to lure him out with cake. Sandy yells, "That is it, SquarePants. We're gonna find you something that's so dang fun that you'll have to come outside." And then parades activities past his window. Trampolines, ice cream, underwater surfing, Ferris wheels, clam wrestling, washing old people. Patrick thinks washing old people is fun. The old man confirms it is for me, which is deeply concerning, but whatever. None of this works because SpongeBob has correctly identified that fun activities are how injuries happen. He broke his butt doing the fun activity of sandboarding. Every activity Sandy shows him is another opportunity for catastrophic harm. SpongeBob's refusal to participate isn't irrational fear, it's learning from experience. The gorilla sequence proves SpongeBob right so definitively it's almost insulting. Sandy's final plan is to have Patrick dress in a gorilla costume and pretend to attack her so SpongeBob will come outside to save her. SpongeBob immediately sees through this. This is your saddest attempt yet. Even Chip knows that's Patrick in the same costume he wore for Halloween last year. But then, a second Patrick appears eating ice cream. Patrick unzips the gorilla suit, proving he's inside it, which means the second Patrick isn't Patrick. The second Patrick unzips his head, revealing a live-action gorilla underneath. A real gorilla. Underwater, the gorilla grabs Sandy and Patrick, puts them in a bag, and beats them with a chair while they scream. SpongeBob watches through his window and says, "This is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about." He's vindicated. His friends mocked him for being afraid of going outside, and the instant they tried to prove him wrong, an underwater gorilla appeared and assaulted them. The universe itself is validating SpongeBob's paranoia. SpongeBob eventually decides to save his friends despite knowing it's dangerous. He tells Chip, "If I don't come back alive, take good care of Gary," which is appropriate farewell protocol when walking into certain death. Gary eats Chip. Rip Chip, you were a real one. SpongeBob opens the door, takes his first step outside, and immediately the wind blows paper onto his face. He screams, "Get off of me!" and panics until Squidward, watering his plants and watching this meltdown, rolls his eyes in judgment. SpongeBob removes the paper and celebrates. "I'm still alive! I did it! I made it outside! Nothing can stop me now!" The gorilla immediately grabs him. SpongeBob asks, "Is it too late to go back inside again?" The gorilla rips him in half. SpongeBob's body is torn into two pieces. His top half apologizes to Sandy and Patrick, admitting, "I'm not scared of going outside anymore, but I'm terrified of gorillas now." That's the lesson. Not that his fear was irrational. Not that he should trust his friends. The lesson is that he identified the wrong specific threat. He should have been afraid of gorillas, not general outside danger. Except, he had no reason to predict underwater gorillas. So really the lesson is, the universe is random, hostile, and unpredictable, and leaving your house guarantees catastrophic injury. This episode accidentally reveals what the entire series has been hiding. SpongeBob gets blown up, crushed, torn apart, burned alive, and dismembered across hundreds of episodes, and he always bounces back with that same goofy laugh. We're supposed to think that's cartoon physics, but watch what happens when he tries to protect himself. He recognizes danger, develops logical safety measures, and gets called crazy by everyone around him. Then reality punishes him for being right, by ripping him in half with a gorilla. Squidward suffers endlessly despite doing nothing wrong. Patrick's stupidity causes constant physical damage. Mr. Krabs loses body parts regularly. Bikini Bottom operates under nightmare logic where violence is random, injuries are severe, and survival requires either regeneration or dissociation. SpongeBob chose dissociation. His relentless cheerfulness isn't a personality trait, it's what happens when showing fear gets you mocked and then vindicated in the worst possible way. He learned that acknowledging danger doesn't prevent it, so he might as well smile. The one episode where SpongeBob acts like a normal person with self-preservation instincts, he gets gaslit by his friends and mutilated by wildlife. So he went back to laughing through the pain, because apparently that's the only survival strategy that works in a world where gorillas ride zebras into the sunset and nobody questions it. SpongeBob's paranoia was always justified. He just stopped showing it because optimism hurts less than being right. Now let's shift over to the next conspiracy. In episode I'm Your Biggest Fanatic, SpongeBob attends the biannual jellyfish convention and meets his idol Kevin the Sea Cucumber, leader of the Jelly Spotters Bikini Bottom's premier jellyfish enthusiast club. After SpongeBob demonstrates his desperate devotion by jumping off a building and punching himself in the face on command, Kevin invites him to try out for the club. SpongeBob carries the entire group through jellyfish fields, completes impossible tests that result in Kevin getting repeatedly stung, and is eventually used as bait for what he believes is a queen jellyfish. The queen turns out to be a robot controlled by Kevin and the Jelly Spotters, designed solely to terrorize SpongeBob. When SpongeBob realizes he's been tricked, Kevin points to the bottom of a cliff where dozens of other victims are gathered, previous fans Kevin has lured out and humiliated. Kevin isn't running a jellyfish club. He's operating a systematic abuse ring that targets obsessive fans, exploits their devotion, isolates them in remote locations, and subjects them to psychological torture and physical danger for entertainment. The Jelly Spotters are predators using fan culture as a hunting ground, and SpongeBob nearly became another permanent victim. The grooming process starts immediately at the convention. SpongeBob approaches Kevin in a trance-like state with massive dilated pupils, repeating "Hi, Kevin" over and over, while Kevin dismisses him as a loser. Kevin tells SpongeBob to jump off a building. SpongeBob immediately screams and we see him falling past the window. He reappears inside moments later saying, "Anything," proving he'll do literally anything Kevin asks without question. Kevin then tells him to punch himself in the face. SpongeBob does it with a boxing glove, causing facial damage. When Kevin asks if it hurt, SpongeBob holds up a spiked metal glove and asks, "Do you want it to hurt me, Kevin?" This is textbook abuse victim behavior. SpongeBob is so desperate for Kevin's approval that he's volunteering to escalate his own suffering. Kevin and the Jelly Spotters laugh at this display of self-harm. Then Kevin announces they should bring SpongeBob jellyfishing with them. One Jelly Spotter objects, saying he's a geek, but Kevin whispers his real intention: "I won't let the guy join the club. I just want to see how many times he can get stung before he goes running home like a baby." Kevin has identified a vulnerable target and is now isolating him. The physical abuse begins the moment they leave the convention. Kevin tells SpongeBob they're driving through jellyfish fields with the top down, but the camera pans down to reveal SpongeBob is carrying all of them. He collapses from exhaustion. Kevin immediately orders him to retrieve their nets, and SpongeBob opens the back of his pants like a trunk, exposing his buttocks while handing over equipment. SpongeBob is vibrating with excitement, babbling about how happy he is to be with the Jelly Spotters, and Kevin interrupts with, "Hold it," causing SpongeBob to freeze literally solid. Kevin announces SpongeBob must pass a rigorous test, and the Jelly Spotters all laugh together. This is coordinated group abuse. They're all in on it, mocking SpongeBob while he remains frozen and vulnerable. Kevin's first test is catch a jellyfish, and one immediately flies into SpongeBob's net. The Jelly Spotters start discussing letting him join, but Kevin slaps the net, releasing the jellyfish, which stings Kevin's head. Instead of acknowledging SpongeBob succeeded, Kevin changes the test to 2 jellyfish, then 20 jellyfish, then kicks the net, so all 20 sting him. Kevin is sabotaging his own tests and injuring himself just to deny SpongeBob entry. The escalation into life-threatening danger happens when Kevin announces they're capturing a queen jellyfish. SpongeBob asks, "Can I help?" And Kevin responds, "We can't do it without you." Then SpongeBob is shown tied by his arms and legs, hanging between 2 sticks as live bait. Kevin hands him a queen jellyfish call that makes a groaning sound resembling the word loser. SpongeBob doesn't realize this is mocking him. He thinks it's a legitimate tool. The Jelly Spotters hide behind bushes while SpongeBob blows the call for hours until it gets dark. A giant jellyfish with a tiara appears, and SpongeBob screams, "She's here, Kevin!" But when he looks behind the bush, the Jelly Spotters are gone. Only Kevin's sting ointment remains. SpongeBob is abandoned, tied up, in the dark, facing what he believes is a deadly queen jellyfish. The jellyfish zaps the poles, and SpongeBob runs until he reaches a cliff with nowhere to go. He begs on his hands and knees, "Please don't be angry, Your Highness," while crying. Then a screen opens on the jellyfish, revealing Kevin and the Jelly Spotters controlling the robot from inside. They're laughing. Kevin's reveal confirms this is serial behavior with multiple victims. SpongeBob asks, "What about my final test?" And they all laugh. Kevin says, "Did you think we'd actually let you join the Jelly Spotters?" When SpongeBob protests, "I was your biggest fan," Kevin responds, "So were they," and points to the bottom of the cliff, where dozens of people are gathered around a fire. One looks up and yells, "Hey, look, everybody, Kevin's back!" And they all shout angrily at him. These are previous victims. Kevin has done this exact routine multiple times before, identify devoted fans, promise them club membership, subject them to escalating abuse, and finally abandon them in remote, dangerous locations after revealing it was all a prank. The victims at the bottom of the cliff are a support group of Kevin's survivors. They're camping together because they're probably too traumatized to go home, or they're waiting to confront Kevin when he inevitably brings another victim. This is organized predatory behavior with a documented pattern. Kevin's taunting reaches its peak when he and the Jelly Spotters chant, "Loser, loser, loser, loser," at SpongeBob. They're psychologically destroying someone who worshipped Kevin, who jumped off a building for him, who carried him through fields and subjected himself to repeated stings. SpongeBob finally breaks and says, "I am not a loser," but Kevin just screams, "Loser!" louder. At this moment, King Jellyfish appears an actual dangerous creature, far bigger than the fake queen. King Jellyfish falls in love with the robot and gives chase when they run. The robot crashes and King Jellyfish sees Kevin, the Jelly Spotters, and SpongeBob. The jellyfish growls, "Kiwi," proving even wildlife knows Kevin by name and hates him. They hide in a cave while King Jellyfish tries to bash through with a football helmet. When the bashing stops, Kevin orders, "One of you, go out and check," and the jelly spotters push a sacrificial member outside who immediately gets zapped. Kevin has now turned on his own group members. When the jelly spotters beg him to save them, Kevin admits, "I was just in this for the fashion," while crying, "Help me, mommy, I want my blankie." The moment real danger appears, Kevin reveals he has no leadership skills, no loyalty, and no courage. He's a coward who only feels powerful when tormenting people weaker than him. SpongeBob saves everyone by blowing a bubble pie for King Jellyfish, who leaves happily to eat it. The jelly spotters rip Kevin's crown off his head and give it to SpongeBob, tearing Kevin's flesh in the process. SpongeBob says, "I didn't know this was a hat." And Kevin responds tearfully, "It wasn't," confirming they literally ripped part of his body off. Back at the convention, SpongeBob tells Patrick he turned down joining the club because it's not about Kevin, it's about Jellyfish. Patrick responds, "Hero worship is unhealthy," while towing Jeffrey Jellyfish tied up in a wagon, proving Patrick learned absolutely nothing and is now doing the exact same obsessive behavior to a different victim. The cycle continues. Kevin the Sea Cucumber runs a cult of personality disguised as a hobbyist club, systematically targets vulnerable fans who demonstrate extreme devotion, isolates them from safety and witnesses, subjects them to escalating physical and psychological abuse, and abandons them in dangerous locations after breaking them down emotionally. There's a cliff full of previous victims. Kevin's own club members enable his behavior until they become targets themselves. SpongeBob's willingness to self-harm on command, his complete trust in Kevin's authority, and his confusion when the abuse is revealed, all classic signs of someone who's been groomed by a predator. The episode frames this as a lesson about not worshipping false idols, but what it actually documents is SpongeBob's narrow escape from a serial abuser who uses fame and social status to hunt fans. Kevin is still out there, the jelly spotters are still recruiting, and somewhere, another obsessed fan is saying hi Kevin, while Kevin decides how badly he wants to hurt them. Let's slide into the next conspiracy. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In episode Band Geeks, Squidward's high school rival Squilliam Fancison calls to brag about leading a fancy band that's supposed to play the Bubble Bowl, then reveals he's too busy and asks if Squidward's band can cover for them. Squidward lies and claims he has a band, so he frantically recruits Bikini Bottom citizens by posting flyers, promising fulfillment and free refreshments. For 4 days, Squidward attempts to train this group of untalented amateurs who have never played instruments before. They're catastrophically terrible breaking windows with their noise, fighting each other with instruments, and causing a blimp explosion that kills 3 flag twirlers. On day 4, Squidward tells them not to bother showing up because they failed him, and he'll just say they all died in a marching accident. SpongeBob gives a motivational speech that makes absolutely no logical sense. Everyone agrees anyway, and the next day at the Bubble Bowl, they perform flawless stadium rock with professional musicianship despite 0 additional practice. SpongeBob suddenly has a trained rock singing voice he's never demonstrated before. Patrick plays expert electric drums. Plankton masters keyboard after running out of breath on harmonica the previous day. This transformation is physically impossible without supernatural intervention. SpongeBob possesses unconscious reality warping powers that manifest when he believes hard enough in something, and his belief that they could make Squidward proud literally rewrote reality overnight to make it happen. The setup establishes that nobody in this band has any musical ability whatsoever. Squidward asks how many have played instruments before. Plankton asks if instruments of torture count. Patrick asks if mayonnaise is an instrument, then immediately asks if horseradish is an instrument. Nobody raises their hand with actual experience. Squidward tries to have them repeat 6 notes on his clarinet. The brass section repeats it badly. The wind section repeats it badly. The drummers misunderstand the assignment entirely and blow on their drumsticks, which shoot out of their mouths and pin Squidward to the wall. He says, "Too bad that didn't kill me." Day 1 establishes this group is musically hopeless. When Squidward tries to get them to march in rhythm, Patrick kicks Sandy in the leg, Sandy beats him unconscious, and Patrick's body gets stuck inside a trombone. Day 2 shows them marching down the street playing Semper Fidelis so badly that the flag twirlers spin out of control, crash into a blimp, and die in an explosion. 3 people are dead. Incidental 41 plays taps at their funeral while Squidward lies on the ground in fetal position. This isn't incompetence, this is active danger. Day 3 proves individual skill hasn't improved at all. Squidward asks Plankton about his harmonica solo. Plankton says, "It's tremendous. You want to see?" And then runs back and forth through the harmonica holes playing notes, but runs out of breath, walks slowly to the final hole while panting, blows 1 unsuccessful raspberry, and faints. Plankton has the lung capacity of a single-celled organism, which makes sense because he is 1, but the point stands he cannot sustain musical performance for more than 10 seconds. Day 4 is the final practice before the show. Squidward acknowledges, "I know that you haven't improved since we began," while Patrick is actively chewing on a trumpet. Squidward develops a theory. If they play loud, people might think they're good. He counts them in, and they play so loud it breaks every window in the building and deforms Squidward's face beyond recognition. His entire body gets blasted, his shirt rips, his face looks like melted wax, and his baton breaks. The sound was a physical weapon. The breaking point happens when Harold yells at Mr. Krabs about playing with big meaty claws, and the entire band erupts into violence. Incidental 13 slams a drum on Incidental 106. Mr. Krabs and Incidental 40 charge at each other with woodwinds. Mrs. Puff smashes them both with cymbals. Sandy breaks xylophone keys off Incidental 42 and chases Patrick with a trumpet while Patrick screams. This isn't a disagreement, this is a riot. Everyone is using instruments as weapons in coordinated physical combat. When practice ends at 10 o'clock, Squidward slams the door open and delivers his speech. You took my one chance in happiness and crushed it. Crushed it into little, tiny, bite-sized pieces. I really had expected better of you people. I guess I'm a loser for that too. Don't bother showing up tomorrow. I'll just tell them you all died in a marching accident. So thanks. Thanks for nothing. He leaves crying. Patrick says, "You're welcome," because Patrick doesn't understand sarcasm or emotional devastation. At this point, the band has zero chance of performing successfully. They're disbanded, untalented, violent, and uninvited. SpongeBob's motivational speech is where reality breaks. He asks the group, "What kind of monsters are we?" and reminds them that Squidward has always been there for them when it was convenient for him. He asks Evelyn who rescued her son Jimmy from a fire. Evelyn says a fireman. He asks Larry who revived him when his heart gave out from tanning pills. Larry says some guy in an ambulance. SpongeBob then says, so if we can all just pretend that Squidward was a fireman or some guy in an ambulance, then I'm sure that we can all pull together and discover what it truly means to be in a marching band. This logic makes zero sense. Squidward is not a fireman. He didn't save anyone. Pretending he's someone else who did heroic things has no connection to learning music. Harold yells, "Yeah, for the firemen!" and everyone cheers. They've all accepted completely nonsensical reasoning as profound truth. SpongeBob then says, "Now let's make Squidward proud," and counts them in. This is the moment. SpongeBob believes they can do it, and his belief becomes reality. The Bubble Bowl performance is supernatural. The football announcer introduces the Bikini Bottom Superband, and they march onto a live-action football field. Patrick sees the humans and says, "These are some ugly-looking fish. They're nervous but ready." Squidward counts them in nervously, glancing at Squilliam, who's smirking. The band plays an intro fanfare, and Squidward's eyes go wide with shock. Plankton plays perfect keyboard notes. Then SpongeBob starts singing. Except it's not SpongeBob's voice. The transcript notes voice of David Glenn Isley, because SpongeBob is suddenly singing professional stadium rock with trained vocal power and range he's never demonstrated in any episode before or after this one. Patrick plays expert electric drums while wearing sunglasses. Sandy shreds electric guitar. Mrs. Puff plays electric bass. Mr. Krabs plays keytar. Pearl plays saxophone. These are not the instruments they practiced with. They had trumpets, clarinets, drums, and xylophones during practice. Now they have a full rock band set up with electric instruments. They perform Sweet Victory flawlessly with choreography, stage presence, and musical precision that would require years of training. Squilliam has a literal heart attack from shock and faints. This transformation happened overnight with zero practice. SpongeBob's powers work through emotional belief, not conscious control. When he genuinely commits to helping someone or achieving something, reality restructures itself to accommodate his conviction. The magic pencil draws real objects because SpongeBob believes it's magic. The imagination box creates shared sensory experiences because SpongeBob believes imagination is real. He survives impossible injuries because he believes he'll be fine. In Band Geeks, SpongeBob believed they could make Squidward proud, delivered a nonsensical speech that somehow convinced everyone, and reality rewrote itself overnight to manifest that belief into a professional rock performance. The band didn't improve through practice, they improved through SpongeBob's unconscious reality manipulation. Squidward thinks he got lucky, but he didn't. SpongeBob decided they would succeed, and the universe had no choice but to comply. That's cosmic-level power disguised as optimism, and SpongeBob has no idea he's doing it. Alright, time for the next conspiracy. In episode T at the Tree Dome, SpongeBob meets Sandy the squirrel while she's fighting a giant clam. After they bond over karate, Sandy invites SpongeBob to her tree dome for tea and cookies. When SpongeBob asks about her air helmet, Sandy explains she needs it to breathe and says, "I gotta have my air." SpongeBob immediately lies and says, "Me too. I love air. Air is good," and claims, "Air is my middle name. The more air, the better. Can't get enough of that air." The next day, SpongeBob enters Sandy's dome, which has no water inside, only air. He begins dehydrating immediately, but refuses to leave or ask for help because admitting he lied would be embarrassing. SpongeBob visibly shrivels into a dried-out husk, develops wrinkles, loses mobility, and repeatedly chants, "I don't need it," while his body literally dies. Patrick enters to help and also starts dying, still insisting SpongeBob can't admit weakness because you'll blow it. Both end up as actual dead organisms, live-action dried sponge, and starfish lying on the grass before Sandy finally gives them water. Helmets. SpongeBob's inability to admit vulnerability, ask for help, or prioritize survival over social acceptance is a pathological condition that nearly kills him. His toxic positivity isn't wholesome optimism, it's a life-threatening personality disorder where maintaining false personas matters more than staying alive. The lying starts immediately when Sandy mentions her air helmet. SpongeBob asks to try it on, and Sandy refuses. "Heck no, I need it to breathe. I gotta have my air." This is Sandy clearly establishing that air is essential for her survival as a land mammal. SpongeBob, who is a sea sponge that lives underwater and has never encountered air before, immediately responds, "Me too. I love air despite having zero experience with it." Sandy seems skeptical. "No kidding?" Because she recognizes this makes no biological sense. SpongeBob doubles down. "Why? Air is my middle name. The more air, the better. Can't get enough of that air." He's constructed an entire fake identity around loving something he's never experienced because he thinks it will make Sandy like him more. When Sandy invites him over for tea, SpongeBob runs to Patrick and asks, "What's air?" Patrick thinks Sandy puts on airs, meaning she's fancy, so he teaches SpongeBob to hold his pinky up. SpongeBob has now committed to visiting an environment that could kill him based on a complete misunderstanding and a lie he told to impress someone he just met. The dehydration begins the instant SpongeBob enters the dome. Sandy rings the doorbell, an alarm sounds, and all the water drains out through the floor. SpongeBob watches the water disappear, his flowers sag, and his own body starts sagging. His whistling becomes stifled, his lips blow strangely, and his arm rolls up into a ball. He panics and bangs on the door, screaming, "Sandy! Sandy! Open up!" But when Sandy opens it, SpongeBob immediately collapses and says, "Sandy, something's gone terribly wrong. There's no water in here." Sandy smiles and explains, "Course there's no water, nuttin' but air." She asks, "That ain't a problem, is it?" And SpongeBob, despite literally dying seconds ago, laughs defiantly and says, "Problem? That's how I like my air. With no water." He takes a deep breath, Sandy walks away, and SpongeBob immediately coughs violently with black circles around his eyes. He's already showing symptoms of severe dehydration but refuses to leave because admitting he lied would be socially unacceptable. Sandy gives SpongeBob a tour of the tree dome while he continues dying. She explains, "This air is the driest, purest, most airiest air in the whole sea," while SpongeBob gasps weakly after each adjective. She shows him her birdbath and oak tree. SpongeBob becomes fixated on the water in the birdbath, his survival instinct, recognizing he needs it, and tries to sneak away. Sandy continues talking. SpongeBob finally escapes and wallows in the birdbath, absorbing all the water, but the bird punches him off. SpongeBob gets back to his spot before Sandy notices anything. She mentions her treadmill and says, "Let's have that tea now." SpongeBob is now gasping with black circles around his eyes again. Patrick appears outside the dome, pointing at his pinky, reminding SpongeBob to maintain the fancy persona. SpongeBob weakly holds up his pinky despite being on the verge of death. At the picnic table, SpongeBob has developed wrinkles around his eyes and his mouth is puckered up like a raisin. He's transforming into a desiccated corpse in real time. The flowers incident reveals how far gone SpongeBob is. He brought Sandy flowers, but his fingers have locked in place from dehydration and he physically cannot let go. Sandy has to strain with effort to pry them from his hand, and part of his pinky falls off in the process. A piece of SpongeBob's body just broke off and he closes his bony, crusty hand like it's normal. Sandy asks, "You okay?" And SpongeBob, in a hoarse voice, says, "Yes, I'm okay." He's missing a finger. His voice has changed, his skin is crusty. When Sandy asks if she can get him anything, SpongeBob says, "Water would be nice," which is the closest he comes to honesty, but Sandy thinks he means water for the flowers and leaves. SpongeBob tries to escape through the door but stops himself, remembering Sandy saying, "I like you, SpongeBob." We could be tighter than bark on a tree, and Patrick's advice, when in doubt, pinky out. He holds up his pinky, gets a burst of confidence, and says, "I don't need water. Water's for quitters. I don't need it." This is the mantra. He's convincing himself that needing water, a biological necessity for his survival as a sea sponge, is weakness. The breaking point comes when Sandy brings out a vase of ice-cold water for the flowers. SpongeBob is now completely shriveled, watching a drop of water slide down the glass while Sandy talks about how fascinating sea critters must be. She leaves to get cookies, and SpongeBob starts thinking, I don't need it, I don't need it, I definitely don't need it. The camera cuts between close-ups of his shriveled face and the vase of water. He keeps repeating, I don't need it, getting quieter and more desperate until finally he screams, I need it, and shoots into the air, bounces off the ceiling, and grabs the vase. Patrick bursts through the door yelling, no, SpongeBob, pinky, pinky! But SpongeBob holds up his pinky and guzzles the entire vase, screaming, I'm a quitter. He's so psychologically damaged by this experience that drinking water to survive makes him feel like a failure. Patrick's entrance proves this is a systemic problem with how both of them handle vulnerability. Patrick enters saying, you can't leave now, you'll blow it, and carries SpongeBob back to the table saying, don't worry, buddy. You're doing fine. Patrick also starts dying, immediately getting weak, dropping SpongeBob, crawling on the floor, panting, but he stands up and yells, what kind of place is this? Like it's the dome's fault instead of their terrible decision-making. Both struggle to open the door and pass out. The camera fades to show them on the grass as live-action organisms, an actual dried-out sponge and starfish. They're dead. They died because SpongeBob lied about liking air, and Patrick reinforced that admitting you need help means failure. Sandy has to revive them with water helmets using a hose. When Sandy says, if y'all needed water, you shoulda asked, she's pointing out the obvious solution they both ignored because asking for help was unthinkable. SpongeBob's toxic positivity operates as a defense mechanism that becomes self-destructive when taken to its logical extreme. Throughout the series, he maintains cheerfulness during torture, never admits when situations are dangerous, forces himself to participate in things that harm him, and prioritizes pleasing others over his own safety. In this episode, that pattern nearly kills him because he valued Sandy's approval more than breathing. Patrick's involvement shows this is a cultural problem, where both characters have internalized that vulnerability equals weakness and asking for help equals quitting. They'd rather die maintaining a false image than admit they made a mistake. SpongeBob calling himself a quitter for drinking water when he's dying of dehydration reveals how deeply this dysfunction runs. His optimism isn't strength. It's avoidance of reality that escalates into life-threatening denial, and the show keeps rewarding this behavior by having him survive impossible situations, which only reinforces that ignoring problems works. Except, this time it didn't work. He became a literal corpse on Sandy's lawn because he couldn't say, I need help. Let's carry on and get into the next conspiracy. In episode Krusty Love, Mr. Krabs cries over the cash register, being 1 penny short, claiming money makes the world go round and keeps everything functioning. Then he sees Mrs. Puff eating a Krabby Patty and instantly falls in love. SpongeBob introduces them, and Mr. Krabs takes her on a date where he spends $100,000 in a single night, his entire fortune. He comes home crying because he can't control his spending around her. Mr. Krabs gives SpongeBob his wallet and makes him promise not to let him spend any money. But the second date spirals into chaos as Mr. Krabs' eyes physically transform into hearts whenever Mrs. Puff appears, causing him to demand SpongeBob buy flowers, chocolates, hats, fur coats, jewelry, and dozens of other items, then immediately scream at SpongeBob for spending all his money. This cycle repeats until SpongeBob has a complete mental breakdown screaming censored profanity. Mr. Krabs' obsession with money isn't greed, it's addiction behavior he uses to fill profound emotional emptiness. The moment he finds genuine connection with Mrs. Puff, his compulsive patterns transfer from hoarding to spending because he's never learned emotional regulation or balanced relationships. The episode opens with Mr. Krabs alone in his office, stitching a pattern of a dollar bill while humming to himself. This is someone whose entire identity revolves around money. He suddenly stops, runs to the cash register, and discovers it contains $49.08 instead of 9 cents. 1 penny is missing. Mr. Krabs puts his head on the register and starts crying. SpongeBob tries to comfort him, saying, "It's just a penny, sir. It doesn't matter." Mr. Krabs explodes. Doesn't matter? It's money that makes the world go round, boy. It's money that keeps your pants square. He's constructed an entire philosophy where money is the fundamental force of reality. Not relationships, not happiness money, this is rationalization. Mr. Krabs has built an ideological framework to justify his addiction so he can continue compulsive hoarding without acknowledging he's filling a void. The transformation happens instantly when Mr. Krabs sees Mrs. Puff. Mid-sentence about how nothing could matter more than money, he trails off, "Not even that." Scrumptious, curvy, cutie. His entire value system collapses in real time. When SpongeBob identifies her as Mrs. Puff, Mr. Krabs asks what happened to Mr. Puff, and the scene cuts to a live-action lamp being turned on. Mr. Puff was killed and turned into a lamp. Mr. Krabs doesn't even register this horror. He just says, "Oh, what I wouldn't give to have a lass like that on me claw." When SpongeBob offers to introduce them, Mr. Krabs protests he's too old and too hard-shelled for love. These are the excuses of someone who's been isolated so long he's convinced himself he doesn't need connection. The introduction reveals Mr. Krabs has completely lost normal social functioning. When Mrs. Puff says hello, Mr. Krabs just quivers and mutters incomprehensibly. SpongeBob tries to translate Mr. Krabs' gibberish. I think Mr. Krabs is saying he'd like to hit you with a rake. Mrs. Puff is scared. More gibberish. Try to guess your weight. Mrs. Puff is offended. Finally, he wants to take you on a date. Mr. Krabs gasps happily and falls over. He can't form words or control his body. His nervous system has shut down from the intensity of feeling something other than money obsession. Mr. Krabs is so emotionally stunted from decades of isolation that basic interaction causes physical malfunction. The first date costs $100,000. They go to a fancy restaurant where Mrs. Puff gets foot rubs between courses, caricatures, and a live-action scuba diver playing piano. Mr. Krabs orders a limousine and has 3 men carry Mrs. Puff away. When the waiter brings the bill, Mr. Krabs screams so loud the restaurant explodes. He returns home crying on the floor. SpongeBob asks how he spent $100,000 in one night. Mr. Krabs says, I couldn't help but spend every cent I had on her. I couldn't control myself. That's compulsion. He cries. I'm caught in the middle of me 2 great loves, sweet Mrs. Puff and the rest of me money. He's experiencing transfer of addiction. For years, he hoarded money compulsively to avoid loneliness. Now his brain has redirected the same compulsive behavior towards spending to maintain connection. The second date proves Mr. Krabs cannot control himself, even when he tries. He gives SpongeBob his wallet saying, don't let me spend any money. They'll keep it cheap by going to the park. But the moment Mrs. Puff's door opens, Mr. Krabs' pupils turn into hearts, and he yells, flowers! Go get flowers! SpongeBob protests, but Mr. Krabs insists. When SpongeBob returns with flowers, Mr. Krabs' pupils return to normal and he yells, we had an agreement, you ain't supposed to spend any of me money. Then Mrs. Puff opens the door, his pupils turn to hearts again, and he gives her the flowers while demanding chocolates. His pupils physically transform whenever Mrs. Puff is near, visualizing altered brain chemistry where rational decision-making becomes impossible. The pattern escalates. Mr. Krabs demands a sun hat, then yells at SpongeBob for buying it when Mrs. Puff says she has one. He makes a sailor's promise to stop. The French narrator announces a few moments later, and Mr. Krabs immediately breaks it. The transcript shows a montage. Mrs. Puff needs a new fur coat. SpongeBob buys it. You're spending all me money. Then, she needs new shoes. He gets them. You're breaking me, boy. Then jewelry, umbrella, bicycle, surfboard, grandfather clock, anchor barbell, television. SpongeBob runs back and forth carrying items, while Mr. Krabs screams, SpongeBob, repeatedly until SpongeBob collapses from exhaustion. SpongeBob finally snaps. He predicts the entire cycle. You want me to buy Mrs. Puff something she doesn't need. Then you'll say, you're spending all me money. Then I'll say, but Mr. Krabs, I'm only doing what you said. Then you'll say, we're not talking about this or this, we're talking about this. Mr. Krabs protests, this time's different. But Mrs. Puff is surrounded by mountains of expensive items asking, are we going to the park soon? Mr. Krabs begs, I'm a lonely old crustacean who's found love. Don't let me lose her. SpongeBob gets him a washing machine. Mr. Krabs immediately yells, how can I cheer up when you're spending all me hard-earned cash? SpongeBob screams, you just did it again! Mr. Krabs responds, I can't help it if you're loose with other people's money. That's projection. Every purchase was Mr. Krabs' demand, but he's externalizing blame to avoid acknowledging compulsion. SpongeBob pauses and screams censored gibberish profanity so vile Mrs. Puff has to look up the words in a dictionary. Mr. Krabs' money obsession is loneliness management. He lives alone, works constantly, has no friends, counts money for fun, stitches dollar bill patterns, cries over pennies. These are behaviors of someone whose emotional regulation depends on accumulating wealth because internal needs have gone unmet, so long he doesn't know how else to function. When Mrs. Puff offers connection, his addiction flips. Same compulsion, opposite manifestation. He can't have balanced relationships because he's never learned balance. Either money is everything or connection requires destroying his finances. Mrs. Puff actually wants a normal relationship where they go Dutch, but Mr. Krabs can't process that. His brain only understands extremes because addiction doesn't allow nuance. Mr. Krabs isn't greedy. He's sick. The penny pinching, obsessive counting. It's all self-medication for decades of untreated emotional isolation. He's never acknowledged because admitting loneliness would mean admitting money doesn't actually fill anything. Now let's keep it pushing to the next conspiracy. In episode Whelk Attack, sea whelks invade Bikini Bottom, devouring citizens and covering the city in purple slime. SpongeBob describes them as creatures that kinda look like Gary but not really, and calls Gary creepy when he appears early in the episode. The whelks are identified as a pernicious form of sea snail, the same species as Gary. When Sandy analyzes their slime inside the mama whelk's stomach, she discovers them whelks are full of germs, and they're sicker than a bull with the squirrel pox. SpongeBob cures them by absorbing their slime, explaining, "After all, I've had the suds." Once cured, all the whelks say meow, the exact sound Gary makes. The whelks don't naturally behave this way. They're sick with a disease that makes them aggressive, and Gary is the carrier. He infected the wild whelk population with germs he's been spreading around Bikini Bottom, turning peaceful sea snails into rampaging monsters. After treatment, they immediately revert to acting like Gary because Gary's behavior is what normal healthy snails do. Gary is an asymptomatic disease vector who caused a citywide biological crisis. The episode opens with SpongeBob and Patrick jellyfishing when an earthquake happens. Patrick points to sea whelks moving toward them. SpongeBob says, "Oh, I've never seen those guys around before, and they get run over, covered in slime." Patrick says, "We're all covered in slime." And SpongeBob absorbs it off both of them, then has to wring himself out. They run to warn Bikini Bottom, but the whelks are already attacking. Johnny on TV reports sea whelks, a pernicious form of sea snail, have invaded Bikini Bottom and are on the attack, devouring innocent citizens and covering the city with purple slime. A whelk eats Johnny. SpongeBob says, "Whelks? Heh, I'm not afraid of some goofy old sea snails." Then Gary appears. SpongeBob shrieks, holds on to Patrick, and says, "Oh, hey, Gary." Gary meows twice and slithers away. SpongeBob tells Patrick, "Gary can be a little creepy. This is the connection." SpongeBob just declared he's not afraid of sea snails, then immediately becomes terrified when Gary, another sea snail, appears. He's subconsciously recognizing that Gary and the whelks are the same species and Gary's presence is unsettling. SpongeBob's initial description establishes the visual similarity. When explaining the whelks to Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob says they kinda look like Gary, but not really, and they spit purple slime. The kinda look like Gary, but not really. Phrasing is critical. They're recognizably similar enough that SpongeBob's first reference point is his pet, but different enough that something is wrong. That something wrong is the disease. Gary is a domesticated sea snail. The whelks are wild sea snails. They should look similar because they're the same species, but the whelks are covered in purple slime and behaving aggressively because they're sick. When the mama whelk appears and Mr. Krabs gets swallowed, SpongeBob and Patrick run to Sandy's tree dome. Sandy asks security questions before letting them in. She asks SpongeBob, "What's your mother's maiden name?" And he answers, "Bubble Bottom." She asks Patrick, "What's your first name?" And he struggles with it. Sandy lets them in and covers her tree dome in metal. Inside, Sandy announces she needs to get a sample of their slime. She explains, "If I can analyze it, I may be able to deduce the cause of their aggressive behavior, and maybe we can stop them." This reveals the whelks aren't naturally aggressive. Their behavior is caused by something analyzable. The whelks break through the tree dome and everyone gets swallowed by the mama whelk. Inside her stomach, they find the Krusty Krab and all the swallowed citizens. Sandy takes a slime sample and borrows SpongeBob and Patrick's corneas to use as microscope lenses. She looks through the microscope and announces, "Well, golly, no wonder they're all grumpy. Them whelks are full of germs. Why? They're sicker than a bull with the squirrel pox." The whelks are infected with germs that are causing their aggression and slime production. This is a contagious disease, not their natural state. SpongeBob immediately knows how to cure them. "I know what to do. After all, I've had the suds. I just have to absorb the whelk snot, and they'll return to normal." He's referencing a previous episode where he had a contagious illness called the suds. SpongeBob understands disease transmission from personal experience. He absorbs the slime from the mama whelk, and she responds, "Meow." That's Gary's sound. SpongeBob continues, "Now, let's get the rest of you cleaned up." He swallows all the whelks, swishes them around in his mouth, and spits them out. All the whelks say meow, meow, meow. SpongeBob comments, "Aw, cute." The moment they're cured of germs, the whelks start acting exactly like Gary. They make the same sounds. They're peaceful. They're cute. This proves their aggressive slime-spitting behavior was entirely caused by illness. Healthy whelks behave like Gary, because Gary is a healthy sea snail. Squidward picks up one of the cured whelks and says, "So, these things went crazy just because they had the sniffles?" He's identifying it as a minor illness, the sniffles, that caused catastrophic behavioral changes. The whelk sneezes on Squidward and everyone laughs. Patrick points out it's in his eye. The disease is still contagious, even after the whelks are behaviorally cured. SpongeBob sneezes again, proving he's now infected from absorbing all the germs. The episode ends with everyone laughing about Squidward getting sneezed on. But nobody asks the crucial question, where did the whelks catch this disease in the first place? Gary is the obvious source. He's a sea snail who lives with SpongeBob, someone who has had multiple contagious illnesses, including the suds. Gary goes outside regularly for walks and to socialize with other snails. If Gary caught germs from SpongeBob's various illnesses and became an asymptomatic carrier, he could have infected the wild whelk population during his outdoor activities. Sea snails congregate together. We've seen this in other episodes. Gary could have spread the disease to wild whelks, who then became aggressive and started attacking the city. The whelks are described as invading Bikini Bottom, suggesting they came from outside the city limits. That means they caught the disease somewhere else and traveled to Bikini Bottom while sick. Gary travels outside the city. Gary is the connection point. SpongeBob calling Gary creepy right after declaring he's not afraid of sea snails is subconscious recognition that something is wrong. Gary appeared at the exact moment whelks were attacking, and SpongeBob's fear response activated. When the whelks are cured and start meowing, SpongeBob calls them cute, the same way he treats Gary. The healthy whelks and Gary are identical in behavior because they're the same species at baseline. The only difference was the disease. Gary has been living with SpongeBob for years, exposed to every illness SpongeBob catches, and SpongeBob catches illnesses constantly throughout the series. Gary became a carrier for whatever made the whelks sick, spread it to the wild population, and caused a biological crisis that nearly destroyed Bikini Bottom. After this episode, the whelks never appear again because SpongeBob cured them all, but Gary is still living with SpongeBob, still going outside, still carrying germs, waiting for the next outbreak. Let's roll right into the next conspiracy. In episode Bubble Buddy, SpongeBob wakes up on Leif Erikson Day, wanting to celebrate with friends, but Patrick is getting giant paper, Sandy went south for winter, and Squidward refuses. SpongeBob decides I'll make a friend and blows a bubble shaped like a person, naming him Bubble Buddy. SpongeBob spends the entire day treating Bubble Buddy as real, taking him to the Krusty Krab where he orders one of everything, going to Goo Lagoon where Bubble Buddy buries Scooter who drowns when the tide comes in, spending 2 hours waiting while Bubble Buddy uses the bathroom, and washing Pearl's dirty flipper with Bubble Buddy's bubble hands. An angry mob forms to pop Bubble Buddy with needles. SpongeBob begs them not to, crying, "He's not just a bubble, he's a Bubble Buddy. He's my friend and I love him." The mob charges anyway. Squidward raises his needle to pop Bubble Buddy, but suddenly Bubble Buddy grabs Squidward's hand and speaks. "Whoa, hey, don't I get a say in this?" He gets into a bubble taxi and leaves. SpongeBob acts like this is normal. Bubble Buddy was an inanimate object for the entire episode until the moment he was about to be destroyed, then he suddenly became sentient and escaped. SpongeBob didn't create life through bubble blowing. He trapped someone's consciousness inside the bubble through intense emotional projection, and that consciousness finally manifested when survival required it. The episode establishes Bubble Buddy as completely inanimate from the start. SpongeBob blows a human-shaped bubble and declares Bubble Buddy. He immediately starts playing with him on a seesaw, but the bubble just floats there doing nothing. SpongeBob provides all agency. When they go to the Krusty Krab, Bubble Buddy floats at the door and SpongeBob says, "Don't be shy, come on," and physically squeezes the bubble through. Squidward asks, "This bubble is your friend?" confirming it's just a bubble. When Squidward asks what Bubble Buddy wants to order, SpongeBob says, "Wait, Bubble Buddy, let me decide for you," and orders one of everything. SpongeBob is projecting personality onto an object. When the food arrives, SpongeBob examines the cheese and gasps, "Bubble Buddy's lactose intolerant. He can't eat cheese." Squidward has to remake everything with increasingly specific demands. No crust, ketchup under the patty, pickles on the left side. At the end, Squidward presents the perfect order and SpongeBob and Bubble Buddy leave. Mr. Krabs waves happily until Squidward reveals Bubble Buddy paid with bubble money that pops. This establishes pattern. SpongeBob talks to Bubble Buddy constantly, assigns him preferences and personality, but Bubble Buddy never actually does anything. At Goo Lagoon, Scooter runs up asking, "Dudes, bury me." SpongeBob buries him in sand and tells Bubble Buddy, "You dig him out while I get some cotton candy." Scooter is left buried as the tide comes in. He says, "Don't just stand there, dude. The tide's coming in while water reaches him." Bubble Buddy doesn't move. Scooter drowns. Later, his ghost appears saying, "Dudes, he made me experience high tide." Bubble Buddy didn't dig Scooter out because Bubble Buddy is an inanimate bubble. SpongeBob's instruction assumed Bubble Buddy could act independently, but he can't. The bathroom sequence reinforces this. SpongeBob places Bubble Buddy inside a port-o-head saying, "My friend's in there," and waits outside. 2 hours pass. A massive line forms. A sign appears reading 45 minutes from this point. Vendors are selling popcorn and drinks to people waiting. Harold finally opens the door and Bubble Buddy is just floating inside. He's been there motionless for 2 hours because he's a bubble. SpongeBob takes him away saying, "You're finished." The crowd is furious that a bubble kept them waiting. The angry mob forms after accumulated grievances. Francis says, "He kept us waiting for a bubble?" Larry says, "He called us fat," Pearl cries. "He washed my flipper," showing her clean flipper that SpongeBob rubbed against Bubble Buddy's bubble surface. Mr. Krabs storms up saying, "He owes me money." Squidward follows. "He made me provide excellent service." Scooter's ghost floats by. "He made me experience high tide." Tom announces, "He poisoned our water supply, burned our crops, and delivered a plague unto our houses." The mob asks, "He did?" Tom admits no, but are we just going to wait around until he does? This is mob hysteria targeting an inanimate object. They tip over the lifeguard stand. Squidward stops them saying, "Don't waste this senseless violence on him. It's that stupid bubble of SpongeBob's that's causing all the problems." He holds up a needle, and the entire mob produces needles chanting, "Pop the bubble." SpongeBob tries to defend Bubble Buddy. He asks, "Is this one of those sewing circles?" The mob says no and steps closer. SpongeBob says, "Pointy objects make Bubble Buddy uncomfortable," but Larry responds, "SpongeBob, that bubble's got to go." "Mister." Krabs announces, "You and that bubble have been nothing but trouble. It's time to end it." SpongeBob screams, "No, I won't let you," and blows Bubble Buddy larger until they float, but they sink back down. The mob surrounds them chanting, "Pop the bubble." SpongeBob makes his final plea, "No, you can't. He's not just a bubble, he's a Bubble Buddy. He's my friend and I love him. Haven't you ever had a very special friend?" He sheds tears. This triggers emotional responses. Mr. Krabs cries about Nickel Buddy. Sheldon mentions Funny Muffler. Larry says Jerky Pal. Harold mentions Boo Boo Keys. They all cry together. SpongeBob asks, "So what do you say?" The mob looks at each other, then brings out their needles again, chanting, "Pop the bubble." They throw SpongeBob away. Squidward announces, "Let's get this over with so I can go home and play my clarinet," and charges toward Bubble Buddy with his needle. This is the moment. Squidward's needle moves toward Bubble Buddy in slow motion. SpongeBob begs them to stop. Then suddenly, Bubble Buddy grabs Squidward's hand before the needle reaches him. Everyone except SpongeBob gasps. Bubble Buddy speaks. "Whoa, hey, don't I get a say in this? I'll see you later, SpongeBob." Things are getting a little weird around here. He gets into a bubble taxi that drives away. Bubble Buddy waves saying, "Happy Leif Erikson Day." Squidward says in shock, "He's alive." SpongeBob responds, "Of course, otherwise he couldn't tell such funny jokes," and everyone walks away muttering. SpongeBob sniffles. They blow up so fast and runs off crying tears of joy. The final shot shows bubbles popping near Squidward, except one. Squidward stares at it and asks nervously, hi?" The episode ends. SpongeBob spent the entire day projecting consciousness onto Bubble Buddy through constant emotional investment. He talked to him, assigned him preferences, attributed agency to him, and genuinely believed Bubble Buddy was alive. For the entire episode, Bubble Buddy remained completely inanimate. He didn't move, speak, or act independently. But at the exact moment when Bubble Buddy was about to be destroyed, consciousness suddenly manifested. He grabbed Squidward's hand, spoke coherently, expressed preference about the situation, and left in a vehicle. SpongeBob showed zero surprise, saying, "Of course," when told Bubble Buddy was alive, suggesting he always believed it. But if SpongeBob always knew Bubble Buddy was alive, why did Bubble Buddy never move or speak until that final moment? Because consciousness was trapped inside, unable to manifest until survival required it. SpongeBob's reality-warping belief powers accidentally imprisoned someone's soul in a bubble prison, and that soul finally broke free when faced with annihilation. Bubble Buddy immediately fled, saying things were getting weird, because being trapped in a bubble while SpongeBob projects your personality for you is psychological torture. Squidward's final nervous, hi? To a random bubble suggests he now understands bubbles might contain trapped consciousness. SpongeBob is out there right now, blowing bubbles and unknowingly creating soul prisons every single day. Next up, the next conspiracy. And before we continue the video, subscribe to our channel. Now let's go on to the next conspiracy. In episode Opposite Day, Squidward wakes up to SpongeBob and Patrick throwing him a surprise birthday party, even though it's not his birthday. Frustrated, Squidward decides to move and calls a realtor who warns that bad neighbors ruin home sales. Panicking, Squidward invents a fake holiday called Opposite Day to trick SpongeBob into being quiet. He tells SpongeBob it's the one day of the year when you get to act different, and convinces him to be quiet and out of the way. SpongeBob believes the lie immediately and starts celebrating. Patrick asks if he's heard of Opposite Day, admits, no, what is it? Confirming he's never heard of it either, but starts participating anyway. By the episode's end, Gary is barking instead of meowing and saying meow in Squidward's voice with a pickle on his face pretending to be Squidward. Even Squidward ends up chasing SpongeBob with a bulldozer yelling, "Happy Opposite Day!" Squidward completely fabricated this holiday as a manipulation tactic, but SpongeBob's belief in it was so powerful that it manifested as reality, forcing everyone around him to participate in a celebration that didn't exist 5 minutes earlier. SpongeBob's conviction turns lies into truth through unconscious reality manipulation. The episode establishes Opposite Day is completely fake from the beginning. Squidward hangs up the phone with the realtor and panics. SpongeBob, no one will ever buy my house with him living next door. Whatever a good neighbor would do, he does the opposite. He gets an idea and repeats, opposite, opposite. The next morning, Squidward wakes SpongeBob by playing drums, cymbals, bagpipes, and a whistle outside his window. SpongeBob asks why he's playing the drum. Squidward denies it's a drum, claims it's his wig case, puts on a wig, and frolics around saying, "Come on, SpongeBob, tackle me." SpongeBob thinks Squidward is sick and tries to push him to bed. Squidward stops him. "Oh, I get it. You don't know what day it is, do you?" SpongeBob guesses, "Wednesday?" Squidward announces, "Why, it's Opposite Day. You mean you've never heard of it? Boy, have you been missing out. Opposite Day is the one day of the year when you get to act different." This is the lie. Squidward is inventing a holiday in real time to manipulate SpongeBob's behavior. SpongeBob accepts it instantly without question. He asks, "Does everybody know about Opposite Day?" Squidward confirms, "Oh, sure, it's a game. Get it?" SpongeBob says, "Oh, a game." Squidward explains, "Normally you're really loud and annoying, so what are you going to be today?" SpongeBob declares, "Quiet and out of the way." "Yeah." Squidward says, "Why don't you get a jump on it?" And SpongeBob runs home giggling, I hate Opposite Day." Squidward takes off his wig and says, "So long, chum," and goodbye, Bikini Bottom. He thinks he's successfully tricked SpongeBob, but SpongeBob's belief has already activated. He tells Gary, "It's Opposite Day," and says, "Too bad it only comes once a year, huh, Gary?" He's treating it as an established annual tradition despite learning about it 30 seconds ago. Gary meows. SpongeBob says, "Gary, where's your holiday spirit?" Gary barks like a dog. Gary has immediately started participating in a holiday he couldn't have known about because it didn't exist until this morning. Patrick's introduction proves the holiday is spreading through belief. The doorbell rings and Patrick announces, "It's Patrick." SpongeBob says, "Patrick, go away. I never want to see you again." Patrick starts crying. SpongeBob opens the door saying, "That's right, you're my worst enemy." Patrick falls to the ground, bawling. SpongeBob explains, "Patrick, you're not my friend. It's just Opposite Day." Patrick responds, "Opposite Day? Hey, I've heard of that." SpongeBob asks, "You have?" Patrick admits, "No. What is it?" Patrick has never heard of Opposite Day. Nobody has heard of Opposite Day because Squidward invented it this morning, but Patrick immediately starts participating anyway. SpongeBob explains the rules and Patrick says, "Oh, let me try." He holds his breath until he turns purple. SpongeBob has to stop him. They spend the rest of the day doing opposite activities. SpongeBob eats from Gary's bowl and meows. Patrick sits on newspapers and meows. They blow themselves into bubbles. They speak in reverse. None of this makes logical sense as opposite behavior, but they're creating rituals for a holiday that doesn't exist. The reality warping becomes undeniable when SpongeBob and Patrick destroy SpongeBob's pineapple. Squidward looks outside and sees them reducing the house to a skeleton. SpongeBob says, "Hello, Squidward." "Oops, I mean goodbye." Squidward, "Aw, isn't Opposite Day terrible?" Squidward screams, "I'll tell you what's terrible, living next to you. You're the worst neighbor in history." SpongeBob responds, "Wow, that's the nicest thing Squidward has ever said to me." Squidward panics and uses a bulldozer to rebuild the pineapple. SpongeBob watches this and has a complete mental breakdown trying to understand the logic. "I made my house a mess," which was making it clean, which made Squidward clean my yard. But that really means he's messing it up. But the opposite of clean is filth, which means filth is clean. That means Squidward is really making my yard a wreck, but I normally wreck my own yard, which means Squidward is being the opposite of Squidward, which means he's SpongeBob. He concludes, "I must be the opposite of SpongeBob by being Squidward." He stretches his nose and puts his belt around his head to impersonate Squidward. Patrick wants to be opposite too, so SpongeBob puts coral under his eyes. They both start chanting, "I'm Squidward," and dance into Squidward's house. When the realtor arrives, SpongeBob answers the door, pretending to be Squidward, and ruins the sale by listing all the house's flaws. Patrick bursts through a painting, also claiming to be Squidward. The realtor asks, "You're both Squidward?" SpongeBob says, "I'm Squidward, he's Squidward, we're both Squidward." Squidward bursts in and yells, "Stop! Get away from her!" He apologizes and says, "I am so sorry, ma'am. I hope these two barnacle heads haven't harmed you." The realtor asks, "Who are you?" Squidward says, "Why, I'm Squidward." The realtor's face turns angry. She yells, "What kind of fool do you take me for? He's Squidward, he's Squidward, you're Squidward, I'm Squidward. Are there any other Squidwards I should know about?" Then Gary appears with a pickle on his face and says, "Meow," in Squidward's voice. Gary is participating. Gary is pretending to be Squidward. Gary couldn't have learned about Opposite Day from anyone because he's a snail, but he's dressed up and impersonating Squidward anyway because SpongeBob's belief made the fake holiday so real that even pets are compelled to celebrate it. The realtor storms out, refusing to sell the house. Squidward chases after her, sobbing. SpongeBob and Patrick walk up and say happily, "Happy Opposite Day, Squidward! We hate you!" Squidward suddenly smiles and says, "Let me show you guys how much I hate you." He gets a bulldozer and chases them down the street yelling, "Happy Opposite Day," while laughing evilly. Squidward invented this holiday as a lie to manipulate SpongeBob. He never believed in it himself. But by the end of the episode, Squidward is participating, chasing them with construction equipment, while celebrating the fake holiday he created. SpongeBob's belief forced reality to accommodate the lie. The fake holiday became real through collective participation triggered by SpongeBob's absolute conviction that it existed. This is the same power that made the band in Band Geeks transform into professional musicians overnight. SpongeBob believes something so completely that the universe restructures itself to make it true. Squidward tried to weaponize SpongeBob's gullibility and accidentally created a real holiday through SpongeBob's reality-warping faith. Next year, on the same date, everyone in Bikini Bottom will wake up compelled to act opposite because SpongeBob decided it's an annual tradition. Now let's dig into the next conspiracy. In episode Graveyard Shift, Mr. Krabs makes the Krusty Krab open 24 hours after realizing he can make more money from late-night customers. Squidward is furious about working the night shift and invents a scary story to frighten SpongeBob, the legend of the hash-slinging slasher, a ghost fry cook with a spatula hand who returns every Tuesday night. Squidward describes 3 warning signs. The lights will flicker, the phone will ring with nobody there, and the ghost arrives on a bus. All 3 signs happen exactly as predicted. The lights flicker repeatedly. The phone rings with no response. A bus drops off a figure carrying a spatula who walks toward the restaurant. SpongeBob and Squidward panic, believing the hash-slinging slasher is real. The figure reveals himself as a nervous job applicant named Richard who called earlier but hung up. Squidward realizes, if that was you on the phone and you on the bus, then who was flickering the lights? The camera shows Nosferatu, the vampire from the 1922 silent film, standing at a giant light switch, flicking it on and off. Everyone laughs and says Nosferatu, like it's obvious. Nosferatu smiles and turns the light off, ending the episode. A century-old vampire operates Bikini Bottom's electrical infrastructure from an undisclosed location, and everyone knows about it. This isn't a joke ending. It's confirmation that the city's entire power grid is controlled by an undead creature who manipulates electricity for unknown purposes. The episode establishes from the beginning that something is wrong with the Krusty Krab's electrical system. After Squidward tells the hash-slinging slasher story, SpongeBob initially believes it, but Squidward admits it was all a joke. Later that night, the lights start flickering on and off. Squidward immediately accuses SpongeBob. "Very funny, SpongeBob." SpongeBob responds, "What?" Squidward says sarcastically, and the lights will flicker on and off. Just like the story, I get it. He realizes nobody is near the light switch and looks shocked. SpongeBob asks, "Hey Squidward, how are you doing that without moving the switch?" Squidward responds, "I'm not doing it. It must be the stupid faulty wiring in here. This place isn't built to run 24 hours a day." This is the cover story. Squidward blames architectural limitations for electrical problems, but the real cause is external manipulation. The building's wiring isn't faulty. Someone is remotely controlling the power supply. The phone rings immediately after the lights flicker. Squidward answers, What? Hello? Hello? Hello?" Nobody responds. He hangs up. SpongeBob walks over and says, "Nice try, Squidward. The phone will ring and there will be no one there." "Oh, you crack me up." Squidward insists, "SpongeBob, I'm not doing this." He starts panicking. "Oh no. Calm down. Calm down. All right, what was it?" There was the lights flicker again, and the phone rings again. He continues, and the walls will ooze green slime? The walls start oozing. Squidward says, oh wait, they always do that. But what was that third thing? He hears a motor and sees a bus pull up. The lights and phone are happening in coordinated sequence with the bus arrival. This suggests centralized control, someone monitoring the situation and timing electrical interference to coincide with other events. That someone is Nosferatu. The hash-slinging slasher turns out to be Richard, a nervous job applicant. He admits, I called earlier, but I hung up because I was nervous. This explains the phantom phone call. The bus dropping him off explains the third sign. But nobody has explained the lights. Squidward asks, wait, if that was you on the phone and you on the bus, then who was flickering the lights? The lights flicker on and off again. SpongeBob, Squidward, and Richard all look over. The camera darts to show Nosferatu standing at a giant light switch mounted on a wall. He's flicking it up and down repeatedly. Everyone says together, Nosferatu, in a tone that's recognition. They know who he is, they know he controls the lights. They're not scared of him. This is treated as normal. Nosferatu smiles and flicks the light off one final time, ending the episode in darkness. The implication is clear. Nosferatu has access to Bikini Bottom's electrical infrastructure and uses it casually enough that residents recognize his involvement immediately. The critical detail is that Nosferatu isn't at the Krusty Krab. The camera darts over to show him, suggesting he's in a different location, likely an electrical substation or power distribution center. He's operating a giant light switch much larger than a standard wall switch, indicating industrial-scale electrical equipment. Nosferatu is controlling power distribution across the grid, and he's chosen to target the Krusty Krab specifically during this night shift. The timing matches Squidward's fake story perfectly. Lights flicker, phone rings, bus arrives. Either this is impossible coincidence, or Nosferatu was deliberately synchronizing electrical manipulation with observable events to create the appearance of a haunting. Why would a vampire do this? Because he's been controlling Bikini Bottom's electricity for so long that he's bored and entertains himself by gaslighting night shift workers. Nosferatu's presence underwater raises questions that nobody in Bikini Bottom seems concerned about. He's a vampire from FW. Murnau's 1922 silent German expressionist horror film. He's supposed to be dead, or at least confined to Transylvania. Instead, he's operating Bikini Bottom's power grid from an undisclosed facility. The fact that SpongeBob, Squidward, and Richard all immediately recognize him by name suggests Nosferatu is a known public figure in the underwater city. They just say his name like, oh, it's Todd from accounting again. This means Bikini Bottom residents are aware that their electrical infrastructure is managed by an undead cryptid, and they've accepted this as normal municipal operation. Throughout the series, Bikini Bottom experiences frequent power outages, electrical surges, and lighting inconsistencies. Lights flicker during dramatic moments. Electronics malfunction randomly. The Krusty Krab's electrical system has been described as faulty multiple times. These aren't infrastructure problems, they're Nosferatu's ongoing manipulation. He controls when lights turn on and off across the entire city. He can target specific buildings or cause citywide blackouts. His motivations remain unclear. Vampires traditionally avoid light and feed on blood, but Nosferatu appears to have abandoned these limitations in favor of electrical management. Perhaps he's drawn to electricity as an alternative power source. Perhaps controlling the grid gives him authority over Bikini Bottom's daily rhythms, making him effectively the city's most powerful unelected official. Perhaps he just enjoys screwing with people during night shifts because eternity is boring and messing with Squidward beats sitting in a coffin. The most disturbing aspect is the casualness of the reveal. When Nosferatu appears, nobody screams, runs away, or demands explanations. They don't call authorities or question why a vampire has access to critical infrastructure. They laugh, say his name, and accept the lights turning off. This suggests long-term conditioning. Bikini Bottom residents have known about Nosferatu's role for so long that they've normalized vampiric electrical control. Children grow up learning that the creepy silent film monster from 1922 operates their power grid, and nobody thinks this is worth addressing. Squidward blamed faulty wiring, instead of immediately suspecting Nosferatu, suggesting people actively avoid acknowledging his involvement unless directly confronted with evidence. The city has collectively agreed to pretend their electrical system is normal, while privately understanding that a vampire decides when lights work. Nosferatu smiled at the end because he knows they can't do anything about it. He controls the infrastructure. He can turn off their lights anytime. And every single night shift worker in Bikini Bottom has learned the same lesson Squidward just did. If the lights flicker and you can't explain why, it's probably Nosferatu, and there's nothing you can do except laugh nervously and hope he gets bored with you. Let's move straight into the next conspiracy. In episode Club SpongeBob, SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally fling their treehouse into the kelp forest with Squidward trapped inside. When Squidward panics about being lost, SpongeBob reveals they have a magic conch shell, a toy that answers questions when you pull a string. SpongeBob declares, "We must never question the wisdom of the magic conch. The club always takes its advice before we do anything." When they ask the shell what to do to escape, it says nothing. They immediately sit down and refuse to move or eat for days, even while starving. Food randomly falls from the sky, and they praise it as a miracle. Squidward tries to eat, but SpongeBob stops him, saying the shell must grant permission first. The shell repeatedly tells Squidward no. At the end, a kelp forest ranger arrives to rescue them, reveals he also has a magic conch shell, and when asked what to do now, his shell says, nothing. All four sit down doing nothing indefinitely. The magic conch shell isn't a children's toy, it's the sacred object of a widespread cult religion that has infiltrated Bikini Bottom society at multiple levels, including emergency services. Members display textbook cult behavior, absolute obedience to random commands, willingness to starve rather than disobey, treating coincidences as divine miracles, and recruiting through social pressure. SpongeBob and Patrick's devotion is established immediately. When Squidward asks what the shell is, Patrick excitedly says, "Ask it something, ask it something." SpongeBob asks, "Magic conch shell, will I ever get married?" The shell responds, "Maybe someday." They giggle like they've received profound wisdom. Squidward calls it just a stupid toy. SpongeBob gasps in horror. "Squidward, we must never question the wisdom of the magic conch. The club always takes its advice before we do anything." Patrick declares, "The shell knows all." This is religious dogma. They've elevated a toy to infallible authority and established that questioning it is blasphemy. When the shell says nothing, Patrick announces, "The shell has spoken." They immediately sit in lotus position and become completely unresponsive. Squidward's resistance demonstrates cult isolation tactics. He yells, "I can't believe you two are going to take advice from a toy." They don't answer. He storms off declaring, "Don't you two sad clowns come crying to me when your circus tent comes crashing down." He wanders the kelp forest trying to escape but keeps getting lost, eventually collapsing back where they're still sitting motionless. Later, he tries tempting them with cooked food, waving it under their noses. "Doesn't that smell good, SpongeBob? You haven't eaten in days." They don't react. Their obedience to the shell's command overrides biological survival instinct. The miracle validates their faith. While Squidward mocks them, he says, "As if the answers to all your problems will fall right out of the sky." The instant he says this, an airplane falls from the sky and drops picnic supplies exactly where they're sitting. SpongeBob and Patrick emerge from their trance screaming, "Praise the magic conch." A random mechanical failure created the illusion of divine intervention, which they interpret as proof the shell provides for those who obey. Squidward attempts to join the feast, but discovers membership has conditions. He approaches nervously, and SpongeBob says, "Once a member, always a member." Squidward celebrates and runs to the food. SpongeBob stops him. "Why don't you ask the magic conch?" "Squidward?" Squidward sarcastically says. Right after, I consult the magic toenail. SpongeBob and Patrick immediately pull the food away. SpongeBob gasps, "Squidward, are you questioning the authority of the magic conch? The conch is the one who gave us this banquet. This copyrighted conch is the cornerstone of our organization," Patrick whispers. "Maybe he's not a brother. The language is explicit. Cornerstone of our organization. Brother as membership verification. This is structured religious hierarchy." The shell's treatment of Squidward reveals arbitrary cruelty disguised as divine will. Squidward asks, "Should I have the spaghetti or the turkey?" The shell responds, "Neither." He asks, "Could I have anything to eat?" It says no. Patrick asks, "Could Squidward have this sandwich?" The shell says no. Patrick asks, "Could I have this sandwich?" The shell says yes. Patrick eats it, apologizing. "Sorry, Squidward." Squidward grabs the shell, asking repeatedly, "Could I have something to eat?" Each time it says no. He asks, "Can't you say anything else but no?" The shell responds, "Try asking again." Squidward asks hopefully, "Can I have something to eat?" The shell says in a sarcastic tone, "No." Squidward shakes with rage. The shell's responses are random programming, but SpongeBob and Patrick interpret them as divine judgment. The Kelp Forest Ranger's appearance proves the cult has infiltrated emergency services. A uniformed official appears asking, "Do you folks need some help?" Squidward runs to him crying, "I'm saved." The ranger asks, "Magic conch shell?" and pulls out his own, cross-eyed with two big teeth. SpongeBob and Patrick scream, "The magic conch, a club member." The ranger announces, "My conch told me to come save you guys. This is catastrophic." A government employee responsible for search and rescue makes decisions based on commands from a toy shell. The cult has penetrated public safety infrastructure. The ending confirms total capitulation. The ranger asks, "What do we do now?" The shell responds, "Nothing." All three immediately sit down. They chant, "All hail the magic conch." Squidward, completely broken, moves between them and sits down saying, "All hail the magic conch." The episode ends with all four sitting indefinitely, while presumably more people wait for the ranger who will never come because his shell told him to sit down. Squidward started mocking the shell as a stupid toy. He ended as a convert, broken by starvation into accepting that a random number generator controls his fate. The Magic Conch Shell Cult is an organized movement with adherents across different social roles, teaching absolute passivity where members sit starving while waiting for divine intervention that may never come. Now we're heading into the next conspiracy. In episode Have You Seen This Snail? SpongeBob gets a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy paddleball set with a challenge to hit the ball 29,998,559,671,003, 149 times in a row. He becomes so obsessed that he ignores Gary's desperate attempts to get food for over a week. Gary's bowl has spiders crawling in it. Patrick confirms SpongeBob has been doing this about a week, maybe 10 days. SpongeBob finally notices and reads Gary's goodbye note, saying he's finding an owner who actually remembers to fill up my food bowl. Gary nearly gets killed by Grandma, an elderly woman with a closet full of dead snail shells from previous pets she overfed to death. Gary barely escapes and returns to SpongeBob, who promises things will be different. SpongeBob's inability to regulate his attention when fixated on tasks creates life-threatening neglect for anyone dependent on him. Gary almost starved, then almost got murdered by kindness, because SpongeBob's brain cannot prioritize survival needs over arbitrary challenges. This pattern repeats throughout the series where SpongeBob's hyper-focus on work, games, or goals causes catastrophic harm to others, and his promises to change never last because his obsessive tendencies are pathological. The episode establishes SpongeBob's dangerous fixation from the start. He opens his package excitedly and reads the challenge number, nearly 30 trillion hits in a row. He immediately accepts, saying, "Dirty bubble, wherever you float, I hereby accept your challenge." He starts hitting the ball, but it keeps hitting him in the face. He says, "Darn it," each time and continues. Gary goes to his food bowl, which is empty. Gary checks the clock. It's snack time. He meows to get SpongeBob's attention. SpongeBob stops briefly and says, "What was that?" but immediately goes back to the paddle ball. Gary meows louder. SpongeBob looks at him annoyed. "Oh, Gary, that distracting sound came from you. I'm sorry I can't play with you right now. Mermaid Man needs me." Gary interrupts again. The ball hits SpongeBob and he snaps angrily. "Gary, please. I'm trying to defeat the dirty bubble." Gary attaches himself to the paddle ball. SpongeBob glares and rants. "So, let's get this straight, Gary. You don't want me to defeat the dirty bubble." Well, I, for one, recognize the importance of this undertaking. But whether or not you do remains to be seen. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to get back to it. Gary jumps on SpongeBob's face. SpongeBob tears him off and yells furiously, "Gary, I hate it when you do that. Now get, and leave your master to his important affairs." Gary looks at the empty bowl with spiders, packs his things, and leaves. SpongeBob doesn't notice. Patrick discovers SpongeBob days later. He knocks on the door and notices the bag of snail food still outside, covered in dust. He walks in calling, "SpongeBob, you around?" He hears muffled "darn it" repeatedly. He finds SpongeBob lying on the ground with bloodshot eyes still hitting the paddle ball, saying "darn it" over and over. Patrick asks, "SpongeBob, what happened?" SpongeBob just stares at the paddle with bloodshot eyes and says, "Darn it." Patrick has to shake him. Snap out of it. SpongeBob finally responds, "Patrick, I took the dirty bubble challenge." Patrick asks how long SpongeBob has been doing this. Patrick pours seahorse milk, which comes out solid and rotten. He tastes it and shudders. Yeah, it's about a week, maybe 10 days. SpongeBob is horrified. 10 days? He searches everywhere for Gary, screaming his name but can't find him. He discovers Gary's note taped to his mailbox. The note says, "Dear SpongeBob, these last few years have been some of the best of my life, but I must move on. Don't bother to come looking for me. By now, I have probably found a new owner who actually remembers to fill up my food bowl every now and again." SpongeBob starts crying. "Dear Neptune, what have I done?" Patrick says scornfully, "What do you mean you drove him away?" It's right there in black and white. This is the critical moment. SpongeBob endangered Gary's life through complete neglect caused by obsessive fixation on a meaningless toy challenge. Meanwhile, Gary's situation gets progressively worse. He wanders into another town starving. He finds nachos in an alley, but 3 aggressive snails chase him away hissing. An elderly woman named Grandma finds him and mistakes him for her missing pet, Miss Tuftsy. She takes him home and immediately starts overfeeding him. She gives him heart-shaped cookies, puts an electric blanket on extra cozy setting, promises deviled eggs, and plays jazz music. She feeds him constantly. Later, she feeds him more cookies and popcorn while watching TV. The next day, she makes him pancakes with syrup and fresh squeezed orange juice. She takes him shopping and buys all the scented pine cones. She promises meatloaf. Gary becomes visibly fatter. His belt snaps and fat breaks through his shell. Then Gary opens a closet door and discovers it's full of empty snail shells. These are Grandma's previous pets. The snails in a painting on the wall yell, "Run!" Gary realizes Grandma has been killing pets through overfeeding and he's next. He struggles to escape while Grandma chases him, throwing cookies, saying they were a labor of love. Gary hides behind trash cans. Grandma says, "I can hear your stomach growling." Gary pushes another snail out as a decoy and escapes. Gary went from nearly starving to death with SpongeBob to nearly being overfed to death by Grandma because SpongeBob's neglect forced Gary into a desperate situation where any option seemed better than staying. SpongeBob's attempts to find Gary show he understands the severity but not the pattern. He makes posters saying, "Gary, I am sorry, please come home. Love, SpongeBob." He and Patrick put flyers everywhere. SpongeBob appears on TV screens. He writes, "Gary, come home" in the sky with an airplane. He creates a giant billboard asking, "Have you seen me?" with Gary's picture. He cries constantly. "Mister." Krabs finds him at work with bloodshot eyes walking on his knees. SpongeBob explains Gary ran away. SpongeBob cries into Krabby Patties. "Mister." Krabs tells him any problem you have can be solved with a little hard work. SpongeBob misinterprets this as needing to work harder at finding Gary, not addressing his underlying issues. Patrick says bluntly, "You drove him away with your neglect and indifference." SpongeBob acknowledges this, but treats it as a one-time mistake rather than a pattern. Gary eventually returns after escaping Grandma. SpongeBob is standing by the billboard saying, "If only I could see you one more time so I could tell you how much I love you." Gary climbs on his head and meows. SpongeBob doesn't notice at first, then realizes, Gary. He picks him up, hugging him. "I promise, Gary, things are going to be different between you and I." "You'll see, pal." But this promise is hollow because SpongeBob's obsessive personality hasn't changed. Throughout the series, SpongeBob demonstrates the same pattern. He fixates on work at the Krusty Krab to the exclusion of everything else. He becomes obsessed with jellyfish collection, endangering himself and others. He hyperfocuses on pleasing authority figures while ignoring consequences. He pursues goals with tunnel vision that creates collateral damage. In Suds, he nearly dies from illness because he won't stop working. In Nature Pants, he abandons his entire life to live with jellyfish. In The Bully, he becomes so fixated on avoiding flats that he endangers himself repeatedly. SpongeBob's brain operates in extremes, total obsession, or complete neglect with no middle ground. Gary nearly died twice because SpongeBob cannot maintain consistent care when distracted by challenges. The episode ends with SpongeBob promising change, but his neurological wiring makes that promise impossible to keep long term. Gary survived this time. Next time, he might not be so lucky. Let's get going with the next conspiracy. In episode Friend or Foe, Plankton steals the Krabby Patty formula during Mr. Krabs' birthday, and Mr. Krabs explains they used to be best friends. He tells a story where they created a burger together, but Plankton wanted to rule the world, and they fought over the recipe. Plankton interrupts, claiming that's false, and tells his version where Mr. Krabs was obsessed with money and kicked him out. Karen, Plankton's computer wife, reveals both are lying and shows security footage of what actually happened. They accidentally poisoned Old Man Jenkins with their burger, fought over who was responsible, and the recipe tore in half during the argument. Mr. Krabs discovered the perfect formula by accident when shelf items fell into the ruined batch. Both Krabs and Plankton spent decades retelling their origin story as morality tales, where they were innocent victims betrayed by their greedy, power-hungry friend, when the truth is they were equally responsible for destroying their friendship through blame and ego. Neither can admit they poisoned someone and ruined everything themselves, so they've constructed elaborate false narratives that absolve them of guilt while demonizing the other. The episode establishes the framing immediately. After Plankton's failed birthday attack, SpongeBob cries, "Why does he hate us so?" Mr. Krabs sits down and says, "There was a time when Plankton and I were best friends." Everyone gasps. Mr. Krabs narrates their childhood together, born the same day, sharing birthdays, being bullied at school together. He explains they were poor and kids called him Rag Boy because his mother made clothes from trash. They discovered Stinky Burgers, the only burger place in town. Stinky was beloved by kids but told Krabs and Plankton, "If you two yahoos keep coming around, you'll drive away all the normal customers." Stinky drove away in a limo with stacks of cash. Plankton and Krabs decided to make a better burger to gain respect and money. They created a recipe together at the dump and opened a restaurant when Stinky's got shut down. This part both agree on. The divergence comes next. Mr. Krabs' version paints Plankton as a villain. In his telling, customers complained the burgers were barely edible but kept eating because Stinky's closed. Plankton looked at the customers and said, "The very people who ridiculed me are now feasting on my recipe." Krabs corrected, "I thought it was our recipe." Plankton responded, "I'm ruling their stomachs, and soon I will be ruling their minds." Dark clouds appeared with thunder as Plankton laughed evilly. Krabs asked, "But what about satisfying the customer?" Plankton yelled, "Barnacles to the customer. I'm talking about ruling the world. And with this secret recipe, nothing will stop me." They fought over the recipe, it tore in half, and Plankton ejected Krabs from the restaurant using a trapdoor. Mr. Krabs landed in trash saying, "You'll regret this one day." This version makes Plankton a power-mad megalomaniac who betrayed their friendship for world domination. Plankton immediately objects, saying, "Lies," and completely false. He tells his version where Mr. Krabs was the villain. In Plankton's telling, Mr. Krabs laughed evilly, saying, "First I'll rule their stomachs, and then their money." Dark clouds and thunder appeared. Plankton asked, "But what about satisfying the customers?" Krabs yelled, "Barnacles to the customers. I'm talking about coins, cash, wallets, bank accounts, and with this secret recipe, nothing will stop me." They fought, the recipe tore, and Krabs put Plankton in a straw and spit him out into trash. Plankton yelled, "You'll regret this one day." This version makes Mr. Krabs a money-obsessed capitalist who betrayed their friendship for profit. Both stories are structurally identical, same dialogue reversed, same villain speech with weather effects, same trash landing, just with the villain role swapped. Karen interrupts, revealing both are liars. She explains, "In those days I was just starting out as a security system. Plankton and I met when he installed me. She had recorded everything in her databanks and shows the footage." The truth, they opened in the dump with their burger. Old Man Jenkins arrived, the man who'd helped Krabs' mother. Krabs said, "It would be an honor if you'd be the first to try our delicious burgers." Jenkins took a bite, smiled, then fell unconscious. A newspaper headline read, "Plab Patties KO Old Man J." Krabs said horrified, "I can't believe we poisoned that sweet old guy." Plankton replied, "Well, he is old." Krabs snapped, "That guy's like family to me." They started blaming each other. Plankton said, "It was your fault the patty was tainted." Krabs countered, "You're the one who put too much seaweed sauce." Plankton yelled, "You let it sit out too long." They fought over the recipe. It tore. Plankton stormed out. Krabs looked at the ruined batch where shelf items had spilled into the cauldron during their fight. He tasted it and said, "I've done it. I've discovered the perfect patty batter." The truth reveals both were responsible, but neither could accept blame. They didn't fight over ideology, world domination versus money. They fought over who caused the poisoning. The recipe tore during mutual blame, not ideological betrayal. Mr. Krabs only discovered the Krabby Patty formula by accident after Plankton left, meaning Plankton never had access to the complete recipe. Both went to the elementary school to sell burgers separately. Plankton's chum burgers tasted terrible. Krabs' Krabby Patties were delicious. The kids rejected Plankton and embraced Krabs. Plankton yelled, "I'll steal that cursed recipe from you one day, and I won't stop till I do." Their lifelong rivalry began not from betrayal over principles, but from mutual blame over accidentally poisoning someone, followed by one succeeding while the other failed. The reconciliation scene proves they know the truth, but prefer the lies. After Karen's revelation, Mr. Krabs and Plankton both start crying. Krabs says, "You were my only true friend that didn't have a president printed on him." But money doesn't hug back. Plankton responds, "My life has been nothing but a long line of disappointments since we became enemies. All these years I've been trying to steal your formula. But I was really just trying to steal back our friendship." They hug crying. Then Plankton grabs the formula from Krabs' pocket and Karen wheels away with it. Plankton yells, "Back off, rag boy." The entire emotional reconciliation was manipulation. Plankton used their shared history and genuine grief to steal the formula. Mr. Krabs fell for it because he wanted to believe they could reconnect. Both are incapable of honest interaction because they've spent decades lying to themselves and others about what happened. Throughout the series, both characters demonstrate this pattern. Mr. Krabs tells everyone he's a humble small business owner when he's ruthlessly exploitative. Plankton tells everyone he's a misunderstood genius when he's repeatedly incompetent. They've each constructed self-serving mythologies. Mr. Krabs became the victim of his evil former friend's megalomania, instead of the lucky guy whose accident created a successful recipe after he and his friend poisoned someone. Plankton became the Active Force 7D, victim of his evil former friend's greed, instead of the failure whose inferior competing product lost to his former friend's accidental discovery. Neither can admit they destroyed their friendship through petty blame over a shared mistake. They need to believe the other was always evil, because accepting mutual responsibility would mean acknowledging their rivalry is sustained by pride, not principle. The episode's title, Friend or Foe, asks which they truly are, and the answer is both. They were friends who became foes not through ideology, but through refusing to admit they were equally wrong. They're still friends who can't admit it because that would require honesty, and both have built their entire identities on lies about each other. Alright, on to the next conspiracy we go, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In episode I'm Your Biggest Fanatic, SpongeBob attends a jellyfish convention where he meets Kevin the Sea Cucumber, leader of the Jelly Spotters Club and SpongeBob's hero. SpongeBob desperately wants Kevin's approval, saying he'd do anything for him. Kevin tells SpongeBob to jump off a building. SpongeBob immediately screams and falls from a window, then returns asking what else Kevin wants. Kevin tells him to punch himself in the face with a spiked glove. SpongeBob does it without hesitation. Kevin laughs and invites SpongeBob to try out for the club, but whispers to his members, "I won't let the guy join. I just want to see how many times he can get stung before he goes running home like a baby." Kevin brings SpongeBob jellyfishing, where every test is designed to cause injury. Eventually, Kevin sets up a fake queen jellyfish to terrorize SpongeBob. When SpongeBob begs for mercy on a cliff edge, Kevin reveals he was controlling the robot. He points to the bottom of the cliff, where a crowd of previous victims sit by a fire, all yelling up at Kevin in praise. Kevin admits he never planned to let SpongeBob join and calls him a loser repeatedly. Kevin the Sea Cucumber runs a systematic operation targeting obsessive fans, getting them to endanger themselves physically and emotionally for his entertainment, and he's done this to dozens of people before, SpongeBob. SpongeBob arrives at the biannual jellyfish convention and spots the Jelly Spotters, Bikini Bottom's premier jellyfish enthusiast club, gathered around their leader Kevin the Sea Cucumber. SpongeBob says reverently, "If I could just touch the hem of his pocket protector, then maybe some of his greatness would rub off on me." Kevin is answering questions from fans taking notes. SpongeBob keeps appearing in different spots, saying "Hi Kevin" in a trance-like state with huge pupils. Kevin finally yells, "Security!" SpongeBob protests, "I would do anything for you." Kevin tests this. "Why don't you go jump off a building?" SpongeBob's scream is heard and he falls past the window. He reappears saying anything. Kevin says, "Punch yourself in the face." SpongeBob does it with a boxing glove. Kevin asks, "Doesn't that hurt you?" SpongeBob holds up a metal glove with spiked knuckles, asking, "Do you want it to hurt me, Kevin?" Kevin laughs hysterically, saying, "This guy's great. We have got to bring this guy jellyfishing with us." One jelly spotter protests, "No, Kevin, he's a geek." Kevin whispers, "I won't let the guy join. I just want to see how many times he can get stung before he goes running home like a baby." The jelly spotters agree, Kevin's a genius. SpongeBob is so excited he needs defibrillator revival. Kevin has confirmed his plan. Invite obsessive fans on tests designed to humiliate and injure them while pretending they might earn membership. The jellyfishing trip begins with SpongeBob carrying Kevin and all the jelly spotters on his back through jellyfish fields. He collapses, exhausted. Kevin asks about nets. SpongeBob's pants open like a trunk, revealing his buttocks as he pulls out equipment. SpongeBob vibrates with excitement, talking about jellyfishing together. Kevin interrupts, "Hold it," freezing SpongeBob literally solid. He announces, "Before you become a jelly spotter, you have to pass a rigorous test. First test, catch a jellyfish." A jellyfish immediately flies into SpongeBob's net. Kevin says, "That doesn't count," and slaps the net. The jellyfish flies out and stings Kevin's head, giving him a giant red sore. Kevin changes the requirement to 2 jellyfish. 2 immediately fly in. Kevin kicks the net, causing all 20 to sting him in a blaze of electricity. Every single test gets designed to make SpongeBob succeed, while Kevin gets injured instead. A montage shows more tests, SpongeBob catching jellyfish upside down, blindfolded, through various challenges. After each one, a jellyfish escapes and stings different parts of Kevin's body until he's completely swollen. Kevin screams, "Okay, SquarePants, it is your turn to get zapped. I mean, are you ready for your final test?" Kevin announces capturing a queen jellyfish. Cut to SpongeBob tied up hanging from sticks as bait. SpongeBob says excitedly, "This is fantastic." Kevin hands him a horn that makes a sound saying, "Loser." SpongeBob blows it repeatedly while the jelly spotters hide behind a bush. A giant shadow looms over him, a massive jellyfish with a tiara. SpongeBob yells, "Hey Kevin, she's here." The bush blows away, revealing nothing except Kevin's ointment. SpongeBob runs with the jellyfish chasing him. He reaches a cliff and begs, "Please don't be angry, Your Highness." A screen on the jellyfish opens, revealing Kevin and the jelly spotters controlling the robot from inside. They laugh. SpongeBob gasps. "Kevin?" Kevin says, You should have seen the look on your face when we zapped you. SpongeBob asks, heartbroken, but what about my final test? Kevin says, did you think we'd actually let you join the Jelly Spotters? SpongeBob says, but Kevin, I was your biggest fan. Kevin responds, so were they, and points to the bottom of the cliff. A crowd of people sit around a fire. One yells, hey look everybody, Kevin's back! They all yell up at him in praise. This is the reveal. Kevin has done this operation multiple times before. That crowd represents dozens of previous victims who Kevin tricked, humiliated, and abandoned on this same cliff. They're praising him. Kevin has conditioned his victims to worship him even after he abuses them. The crowd waits for Kevin to return with new victims because this is a recurring event. Kevin runs a systematic fan exploitation operation where he identifies obsessive fans, invites them on fake tryouts, subjects them to dangerous tests, terrorizes them with robots, reveals the humiliation was intentional, and maintains their worship afterward. Kevin continues mocking SpongeBob. You looked so dumb with your dorky jellyfish call. While they taunt him, King Jellyfish S-Pop, a creature wearing a robe and crown, emerges from the cliff. King Jellyfish sees the robot queen and falls in love. Kevin panics as the robot crashes. King Jellyfish roars, Kevin, and zaps the ground. Everyone runs into a cave. King Jellyfish bashes the entrance, wearing a football helmet. The Jelly Spotters surround Kevin, begging, save us! Kevin yells, don't look at me. I was just in this for the fashion. He curls into a ball, crying, help me, mommy! I want my blankie. SpongeBob walks out and faces King Jellyfish alone. He blows a bubble shaped like a giant cherry pie. King Jellyfish leaves satisfied to eat the snack. The Jelly Spotters emerge gathering around SpongeBob. Kevin says, well, SquarePants, that was impressive, but you're still not in the club because you didn't catch a queen jellyfish. The Jelly Spotters narrow their eyes, run over to Kevin off-screen, and there's a ripping sound, and Kevin screams. They return with Kevin's crown and place it on SpongeBob. The Jelly Spotters witnessed Kevin's cowardice, lies, and exploitation. They watched SpongeBob save everyone while Kevin cried for his blankie. They removed Kevin's symbol of authority and gave it to someone who actually deserved respect. Back at the convention, SpongeBob tells Patrick he turned down the club, saying, it's not about Kevin, it's about jellyfish. Patrick responds, hero worship is unhealthy, while Pan-Out reveals Patrick has Jeffrey Jellyfish tied up in a wagon he's towing. The cycle continues. Kevin spent years building celebrity status in the jellyfish enthusiast community specifically to identify and exploit vulnerable fans. He developed a systematic process. Tell fans to hurt themselves to prove devotion, invite them on fake tryouts, design tests guaranteed to cause injury, use robots to terrorize them, reveal the cruelty was intentional, then maintain their worship afterward. That crowd at the cliff proves Kevin repeated this operation dozens of times successfully. The victims cheered when Kevin returned with SpongeBob. Kevin conditioned them to see humiliation as part of earning his approval. SpongeBob only escaped because King Jellyfish's intervention exposed Kevin's cowardice so completely that even the Jelly Spotters couldn't maintain the illusion. Kevin ran a multi-year psychological exploitation operation targeting the most vulnerable members of his community, and everyone accepted it as part of jellyfish fandom culture until one victim finally proved himself more capable than the leader. Time to shift into the next conspiracy. In episode SpongeBob Meets the Strangler, SpongeBob reports someone for littering and gets targeted by the Tattletale Strangler. He hires a bodyguard, the Strangler in disguise, but before going home, SpongeBob drags him through endless errands, comparing paper towel brands, checking dry cleaning, trying perfumes. When they finally arrive home, SpongeBob can't find his keys for 20 minutes despite having one under the doormat. Once inside, a surprise party happens that SpongeBob organized himself. Patrick says it's on the invitations you sent us. After everyone leaves, another party immediately starts because SpongeBob sent more invitations. When the Strangler finally reveals himself and escapes, SpongeBob chases after him, screaming, I need protection, come back. Even though the threat is gone, SpongeBob sent himself surprise party invitations, invented hours of errands, prolonged every interaction, and refused to let his attacker leave because the alternative was being alone. Throughout the series, SpongeBob demonstrates pathological fear of solitude by manufacturing crises, clinging to Squidward despite constant rejection, and creating elaborate social situations. His inability to exist without constant external validation makes him fabricate emergencies to force companionship. The episode establishes SpongeBob's compulsive need for structure immediately. He stands in front of the punch clock waiting for exactly 8 a.m. When it hits 8, an automated voice announces on-time percentage, 100%. He's maintained perfect attendance. Squidward punches in and the voice announces, on-time percentage, 12%. SpongeBob asks repeatedly, isn't it great working at the Krusty Krab, Squidward? until Squidward yells, "Yes!" SpongeBob immediately says, "Hold that thought. I'm due in the parking lot for early morning litter patrol." This is voluntary work he's assigned himself. He's created additional job responsibilities because his actual job doesn't provide enough structure. He walks outside picking up trash, talking to garbage. Looks like someone missed the trash basket, huh, Mr. Candy Wrapper? When someone tosses trash from a car, SpongeBob says, "Sir, I will have you know it's against the law to litter." The driver laughs. "What are you gonna do? Call the police?" SpongeBob responds, "Yes," as police immediately arrive. This is the Tattletale Strangler, a wanted criminal who strangles anyone who reports him. Squidward shows SpongeBob a wanted poster explaining he's promised to strangle anyone who turns him in. The Strangler mangles a drawing of SpongeBob's face in the police car. The officers say they got him chained up good, then announce, "Oops, not again. Yup, he got away." SpongeBob asks if they'll protect him. They respond, "We ain't bodyguards, kid," and drive off. SpongeBob runs to Mr. Krabs saying, "There's a maniac after me. I need a bodyguard." Mr. Krabs brags about his Navy training until SpongeBob shows the poster. Mr. Krabs gasps and yells, "Go away, SpongeBob! Take your death cloud with you!" SpongeBob shows the poster to other citizens. Larry turns into a cooked lobster on a plate. A construction worker pogos away. Guys at the Tough Tavern run screaming. Everyone is terrified to be near SpongeBob because association with him means death. This should motivate SpongeBob to hide or leave town. Instead, he goes to the bus stop where the Strangler is waiting in disguise with a fake mustache. The Strangler offers to be SpongeBob's bodyguard and shows a drawn-over fake ID card. SpongeBob says, "Looks good to me. You're hired." A price tag hangs from the fake mustache reading 5 cents from the Phony Baloney Mustache Emporium. SpongeBob even points to a receipt on the ground for that exact store, but the Strangler pockets it. SpongeBob asks, "What do we do first?" The Strangler suggests going to a secluded location. SpongeBob counters, "We could go to my house and turn off all the lights." The Strangler agrees, saying, "Perfect. That way no one can hear you being strangled. I mean, protected." Then SpongeBob says, "But first, I gotta do a few errands." The Strangler responds, "Let's make it quick." SpongeBob says, "Quick is my middle name," and immediately does the opposite. This reveals the pattern. SpongeBob manufactures delays to extend social interaction. At Bargain Mart, SpongeBob compares paper towels asking, "In town, around." "What do you think? Bodyguard?" The Strangler says, "Whatever gets us to your house quicker." SpongeBob decides, "I'll take both." At the dry cleaners, SpongeBob says, "I'm not sure if these are my pants." At a perfume store, SpongeBob asks, "How about this one? Bodyguard. Too overbearing?" The Strangler yells, "Can we just go to your house?" These aren't necessary errands. SpongeBob is prolonging the interaction because going home means confronting the threat. Except he's never actually alone at home. He's engineered that too. They arrive at SpongeBob's house. SpongeBob searches for his keys. The French narrator announces 20 minutes later, and SpongeBob is still searching while the Strangler steams with rage. The Strangler suggests climbing through the window. After a painful attempt involving cleats and eye sockets, the French narrator announces 6 hours later. SpongeBob then reveals, "Let me just grab the key I keep under the mat." He had the key accessible the entire time. He manufactured a 6-hour delay. When they finally get inside, and the Strangler says, "I finally got you all alone," the lights turn on, revealing all of SpongeBob's friends yelling, "Surprise!" A banner drops reading, "Congratulations, SpongeBob, 100%, on time." Patrick explains, "It's on the invitations you sent us." SpongeBob sent invitations to his own surprise party celebrating his work attendance. Surprise parties require other people to organize them. SpongeBob created a social event, invited everyone, then pretended to be surprised by his own planning. After the party ends, SpongeBob closes the door, saying, "Alone at last." The Strangler asks, "So we're all alone now?" SpongeBob confirms just you, me, and the floorboards. There's a knock. Everyone is outside again yelling, "Happy birthday, SpongeBob!" SpongeBob asks, "How did you guys know today is my birthday?" Patrick says, "We just do what the invitations say." SpongeBob sent himself birthday party invitations too. After this second party, the Strangler desperately confirms, "Everybody's gone, no more parties today, we're completely alone." SpongeBob confirms. The Strangler starts laughing evilly until Patrick appears saying, "Great parties, huh?" The Strangler tries removing Patrick. Patrick says, "I'm the Strangler? I should have turned myself in," and crashes through the wall. The Strangler screams, "He's not the Strangler. I am," and rips off his fake mustache. Everyone immediately comes back asking, "Did someone say party?" The Strangler runs screaming, "I can't take it." SpongeBob chases after him yelling, "Wait, bodyguard, I need protection." The Strangler escapes in a taxi. gets on an airplane, jumps out with a parachute that's actually SpongeBob, cuts himself free, and crashes into jail. SpongeBob runs up yelling, "Bodyguard, bodyguard!" The Strangler cries, "I'm not your bodyguard! I'm the Strangler!" The officers congratulate SpongeBob for putting the Strangler behind bars. The Strangler says relieved, "At least I'm safe from that yellow idiot." Patrick appears in the cell asking, "What are you in for?" SpongeBob chased his attempted murderer across town, onto a plane, and into jail because the alternative was being alone. Even after learning his bodyguard was the Strangler, SpongeBob still needed him present. Throughout the series, this pattern repeats constantly. In Squid's Day Off, SpongeBob cannot handle being alone at the Krusty Krab and repeatedly imagines Squidward needs him. In Rock Bottom, SpongeBob has a complete breakdown being separated from Patrick. In Texas, Sandy tries leaving and SpongeBob manufactures an elaborate intervention. In Employee of the Month, his entire identity revolves around work recognition. In Pizza Delivery, he cries because a customer rejected the pizza, treating it as personal abandonment. In Just One Bite, he obsessively forces Squidward to try Krabby Patties because refusal represents rejection of SpongeBob's values. SpongeBob cannot exist without external validation, structured social interaction, and constant companionship. His 100% on-time percentage, voluntary litter patrol, self-organized surprise parties, and 6-hour key-searching delay are symptoms of someone who manufactures obligations in crises, because empty time means confronting the void of being alone with himself. He reported the Strangler for littering, creating a genuine threat to his life, then prolonged that threat's presence for an entire day through tactical incompetence, because a murderer trying to kill you is still better than nobody paying attention to you at all. Now, let's continue with the next conspiracy. In episode Frankendoodle, SpongeBob finds a magic pencil that brings drawings to life. He draws Doodlebob as the ultimate prank on Squidward. Doodlebob immediately becomes violent, attacks Squidward, steals the pencil, and runs away. SpongeBob chases him down, declaring, "I brought you into this world, and now I'm gonna take you out." Any last words? He erases Doodlebob, saying, "This is for your own good," and screams, "I am SpongeBob, destroyer of evil." When Doodlebob survives and redraws himself, SpongeBob fights him again and traps him permanently in 2 dimensions by pressing him into a notebook page. SpongeBob frames the imprisoned Doodlebob on his wall and tells Patrick, "See how happy he is?" Doodlebob is clearly trapped and helpless. SpongeBob creates life with the magic pencil, punishes it for acting independently, attempts to erase it completely when it rebels, and when that fails, imprisons it forever while gaslighting observers that the trapped creature is happy. Throughout the series, SpongeBob manufactures situations and relationships, then destroys or traps them when they don't follow his script, demonstrating a pattern of playing God with zero accountability for the suffering he causes. The episode establishes SpongeBob's power immediately when an artist drops a magic pencil into the ocean. SpongeBob and Patrick are playing rock, paper, scissors with bubbles when the pencil falls between them. They scream and hide. SpongeBob touches it and announces, "It is a giant pencil, Patrick. Let's draw some giant pictures with it." He draws a jellyfish. Patrick critiques it, saying, "It's lacking basic construction and your perspective leaves a lot to be desired." SpongeBob responds, "Everybody's a critic. The drawing comes to life and swims away." SpongeBob announces excitedly, "It means we found a magic pencil." This establishes the rules. Anything drawn becomes real. SpongeBob immediately treats this as a toy for pranks rather than recognizing the responsibility of creating sentient life. SpongeBob draws a mustache on Patrick's face, which floats away and lands on Squidward's head as hair. Patrick asks for his turn with the pencil. SpongeBob lectures him, "Be careful, Patrick. Being an artist is a heavy responsibility. Each work of art is like a child and must be treated as such." Patrick says, "I was just going to draw a cartoon." SpongeBob immediately abandons his own advice, saying, "Okay, why didn't you say so?" Patrick draws a crude Squidward that comes to life. SpongeBob says, "It's kind of creepy looking when it moves." Patrick agrees and erases it as it screams. Patrick says sadly, "Poor Squidward," but neither shows concern about murdering a conscious being. SpongeBob just lectured Patrick about treating creations like children, then helped him erase a living creature seconds later. This establishes the pattern. SpongeBob claims moral authority over creation while immediately violating his own rules. SpongeBob escalates to creating humanoid life. He announces, "I've got another idea. This'll be the ultimate prank. I'll draw me, and when Squidward answers the door, it won't be me." He draws Doodlebob on screen while Patrick laughs. SpongeBob says adoringly, "Aw, look at him. Ain't he a doll?" All he needs is a tie and draws one. Doodlebob shouts nonsense and runs to Squidward's house. SpongeBob and Patrick laugh watching. SpongeBob narrates he's knocking on the door. Squidward's answering the door, and Doodlebob picks up Squidward, holds him upside down, and repeatedly pounds his head on the ground. Squidward screams, "Ow! Ow! Ow!" Patrick laughs delightedly while SpongeBob looks horrified. Doodlebob throws Squidward into his house, steals the pencil, and runs away. SpongeBob asks, "What have I done?" "We've got to find him." SpongeBob's horror reveals his expectations. He created Doodlebob specifically to be violent towards Squidward. That was the entire prank. The issue arises when Doodlebob exceeds the violence SpongeBob authorized and acts independently by stealing the pencil. SpongeBob didn't program Doodlebob with moral limits because SpongeBob has none. He simply expected Doodlebob to follow an unspoken script then disappear. When Doodlebob demonstrates agency, SpongeBob treats this as betrayal rather than natural behavior from a sentient being fighting for survival. They search and find Doodlebob at a poorly drawn pineapple. Doodlebob draws a hole and they fall in. Doodlebob attacks them with drawn weapons. Patrick whispers, "He's hideous. He makes me sick just looking at him. Those big bulgy eyes, that square body, those two buck teeth, and that stupid tie." SpongeBob looks down at his own identical appearance. Patrick blushes. "Oh, but it looks good on you, SpongeBob." SpongeBob spots Doodlebob putting down the pencil. Doodlebob breaks through the wall and grabs SpongeBob. SpongeBob screams, "Patrick, do something." Patrick says, "Happy birthday." Doodlebob runs until SpongeBob stops him holding the pencil triumphantly. SpongeBob declares, "Hold it right there, Doodle. I brought you into this world and now I'm going to take you out." Any last words? This is the God complex moment. SpongeBob positions himself as creator with absolute authority to destroy his creation. Doodlebob speaks fast nonsense. SpongeBob stutters, "I'm sorry, what was that?" Doodlebob slows down and repeats himself looking unamused. SpongeBob starts erasing his face. Doodlebob screams. SpongeBob yells, "Hold still, Doodle. This is for your own good. Take that, and this, and that." He erases Doodlebob completely, then screams in victory, "I am SpongeBob, destroyer of evil." Patrick says calmly, "Take it easy. It's just a drawing." SpongeBob returns home and tells Gary, "You should have been there. I kind of missed the little Doodle. He was like a son to me." This reveals SpongeBob's delusion. He called Doodlebob like a son after attempting to erase him from existence, saying, "This is for your own good," like an abusive parent justifying violence. That night, Doodlebob's surviving arm sneaks in, grabs the pencil, and redraws himself. SpongeBob wakes up and Doodlebob appears. SpongeBob asks nervously, "No hard feelings, right?" Doodlebob draws angry eyebrows and yells, "You Doodle, me SpongeBob," reversing their identities while holding the pencil threateningly. Doodlebob chases SpongeBob, erasing parts of his house, pants, butt, nose, and face. They struggle, the pencil breaks, SpongeBob gets the lead piece, and redraws himself. Doodlebob sharpens the pencil, taking both sides. SpongeBob says, "You've made your point. No matter. I was voted most artistic in high school." The fight continues until Doodlebob gets his foot stuck in paper on the floor. SpongeBob grabs a notebook and yells, "Page for Mr. Doodle," trapping Doodlebob inside as a flat drawing. The next morning, SpongeBob hangs the paper on his wall. Patrick arrives asking, "What's with all the ruckus?" Patrick gasps, "It's the evil Doodle." SpongeBob corrects him, putting on glasses and taking out a pipe. "No, not evil. He was just a two-dimensional creature, lost in our three-dimensional aquatic world, longing for a purpose." Patrick asks, "So he's a drawing?" SpongeBob confirms, "Exactly. See how happy he is?" Patrick looks at a framed picture saying, "He still looks kind of creepy." Doodlebob is trapped on the wall, unable to move or speak. SpongeBob claims this imprisonment is happiness, while smoking a pipe like an intellectual explaining away his crime. Throughout the series, this pattern repeats. SpongeBob creates situations, expects them to follow his vision, and destroys them when they don't comply. In Employee of the Month, he sabotages Squidward for threatening his work identity. In Opposite Day, he invents a fake holiday to manipulate Squidward's behavior. In Club SpongeBob, he forces everyone to obey a magic Conch shell's random commands. In Just One Bite, he torments Squidward until he admits Krabby Patties taste good. SpongeBob positions himself as the moral authority in every scenario while violating basic ethics constantly. He created Doodlebob as a weapon, attempted to murder him for acting independently, then imprisoned him permanently while claiming the trapped creature is happy. SpongeBob plays God with sentient life and suffers zero consequences because everyone in Bikini Bottom enables his delusions. Let's go ahead and move on to the next conspiracy. In episode Suds, SpongeBob gets sick with a condition called the Suds, where pink bubbles come out when he sneezes. Patrick pretends to be a doctor and performs increasingly bizarre treatments, plugging SpongeBob's holes with corks, making peanut butter sandwiches on his feet, pulling teeth, jumping on him in a leotard, and repeatedly ripping bandages off his back. Sandy finally drags SpongeBob to a real hospital where the doctor announces, "You get the sponge treatment." A real human hand named Hans takes SpongeBob out of the room and uses him as an actual cleaning sponge, scrubbing a man's back in the shower, washing feet, cleaning dishes, scrubbing cars, and mopping floors. SpongeBob laughs, saying, "This tickles, and I can smell again." Hans rinses SpongeBob with dish soap in a sink and returns him to his normal yellow color. SpongeBob declares, "I feel as good as new. I love the doctor." The medical system treats SpongeBob as literal cleaning equipment rather than a patient, and he's been conditioned to interpret being used as a household tool as healthcare. Throughout the series, SpongeBob's biology and treatment suggest he exists as functional infrastructure for other beings, rather than as an autonomous life form with rights. The episode establishes SpongeBob's vulnerability immediately. He wakes up from a dream about raining Krabby Patties and gets a midnight snack. He makes a peanut butter sandwich and falls asleep at the table. The fridge stays open all night, letting out cold air. In the morning, his entire house has frozen solid. SpongeBob wakes up shivering and slides everywhere, breaking windows. Gary appears wearing a hat and earmuffs. SpongeBob says, "Don't be silly, Gary. I don't get colds, I get the suds." Gary meows questioningly. SpongeBob explains, "If I had the suds, I'd have bubbles coming out of me." He sneezes and pink bubbles emerge. This establishes that SpongeBob has a species-specific illness called the suds that only affects sponges and manifests as bubble production. SpongeBob insists on going to work despite being sick. At the Krusty Krab, he's pale, shaking weakly, and barely standing. "Mister." Krabs asks, "What's wrong with you? You're paler than a baby seahorse." Gary appears and explains, SpongeBob has the suds by meowing once. SpongeBob sneezes, causing a Krabby Patty to splatter all over Mr. Krabs' face. Mr. Krabs says, "All right, SpongeBob, you're too sick to work. I just can't have you sneezing all over my food." The customers overhear this, spit out their food, and panic screaming before scrambling out. SpongeBob returns home and calls Sandy, asking her to escort him to the doctor. Sandy agrees. While SpongeBob is getting dressed, Patrick appears and immediately objects, saying, "You can't go." Patrick launches into a horror story about doctors. He explains they make you sit in a waiting room reading old magazines. He pulls out Coral as a fake stethoscope and presses it against SpongeBob's chest. SpongeBob shoots toward the ceiling, screaming, "No, no stethoscope, no doctor, no old magazines." He begs, "Patrick, I don't want to go to the doctor." Patrick convinces SpongeBob to let him be his doctor instead. Patrick plugs all of SpongeBob's holes with corks. SpongeBob sneezes, but no bubbles come out. He keeps sneezing, which inflates him larger and larger. SpongeBob celebrates, "No bubbles! Patrick, your treatment is working!" Patrick calls Sandy and tells her SpongeBob is in his care now. Sandy says she's coming over to check. Patrick performs increasingly absurd treatments, spreading peanut butter on SpongeBob's foot, pulling out a tooth, jumping on him, and repeatedly ripping a bandage off SpongeBob's back while SpongeBob screams. Sandy arrives and finds SpongeBob inflated into a ball. She announces, "Patrick, SpongeBob has to see a real doctor." Patrick insists, "No, he doesn't. I'm taking good care of him." SpongeBob says, "Ah," and his breath kills all plants in its path. Sandy declares, "I'm taking you to the doctor right now." Patrick and Sandy fight over SpongeBob, rolling him back and forth, using him as a basketball, squeezing him until he launches into the air. SpongeBob rolls downhill and crashes into the Krusty Krab. He sneezes so hard, he blasts all the corks out and releases a massive cloud of pink bubbles that destroys the entire restaurant. Later at the hospital, the purple doctor examines SpongeBob and confirms, "It seems you have the suds. Are you ready for your treatment?" SpongeBob asks nervously, "You're not going to make me read old magazines, are you?" The doctor responds, "No, silly, you get the sponge treatment." He calls, "Oh, Hans." A real human hand comes through the door and takes SpongeBob out of the room. The next shot shows hands using SpongeBob with dish soap to scrub a man's back in the shower. SpongeBob laughs. "Woo! Yeah, this tickles." Hans uses SpongeBob to scrub a man's foot. SpongeBob sniffs happily, "I can smell again." Hans then uses SpongeBob to wash a plate, scrub a car, and mop the floor. SpongeBob celebrates throughout, saying, "Woo, yeah, yeah, yeah." Hans rinses SpongeBob off in a sink with dish soap and puts him back in the doctor's room. SpongeBob is returned to his normal yellow color and declares, "I feel as good as new. I love the doctor." Hans hands him a lollipop. Sandy winks at SpongeBob approvingly. This entire sequence reveals the horrifying truth. SpongeBob's medical treatment consists of being used as a literal household cleaning tool. He's scrubbing human bodies, washing dishes, cleaning vehicles, and mopping floors. He's rinsed with dish soap like actual kitchen sponges get cleaned. He returns to his normal yellow color because he was physically dirty from being used to clean things. The sponge treatment has nothing to do with curing his illness. The hospital uses 6 sponges as free cleaning supplies. Patrick watches jealously and fakes being sick, saying, "Hey doc, well I got the suds too," while hiding a bubble wand behind his back. The doctor responds sarcastically, "Oh yes, Dr. Patrick, we have a special treatment for you." Patrick gets taken away by Hans. He's washed in the sink with soap, used to scrub a cactus while screaming, "Ouch. That hurts!" and used to scrub a toilet while yelling, "Wait, this doesn't seem right." Patrick immediately recognizes he's being exploited as cleaning equipment because he hasn't been conditioned to accept it as normal. SpongeBob has been so thoroughly indoctrinated into accepting his role as functional infrastructure that he experiences joy while being used to mop floors and wash cars. He genuinely believes this is healthcare. The doctor didn't cure his illness. Hans just used him as a sponge until the physical exertion and soap somehow resolved his symptoms. SpongeBob left the hospital having learned nothing except that he should trust doctors to use him however they want. Throughout the series, SpongeBob demonstrates this pattern. In Help Wanted, he's hired at the Krusty Krab specifically for his cleaning abilities when he uses himself to clean the entire restaurant. In Squeaky Boots, Mr. Krabs uses SpongeBob to mop floors obsessively. In Krusty Krab training video, SpongeBob is shown as the ideal employee, specifically because he can be used for any task. In Born Again Krabs, SpongeBob gets sold for 62 cents, establishing his monetary value as equivalent to cleaning supplies. SpongeBob exists in a society that recognizes him as sentient enough to hold a job and pay rent, but treats him as literal cleaning equipment whenever convenient. The medical system participated in this exploitation by using sick patients as unpaid janitorial labor, while calling it treatment. SpongeBob left the hospital declaring he loves doctors because he's been so thoroughly conditioned to accept being used as a tool that he interprets it as care. Hans scrubbed toilets with Patrick, who screamed, "This doesn't seem right," because Patrick hasn't spent his entire life being told his purpose is cleaning. SpongeBob has. The sponge treatment reveals that Bikini Bottom's healthcare system operates on the principle that certain species exist as functional objects rather than patients deserving medical care. Now let's turn to the next conspiracy. In episode Squidward in Clarinetland, Squidward demands a locker to store his clarinet for an important recital. Mr. Krabs gives him an Old Navy locker to share with SpongeBob. SpongeBob cleans it and promises nothing bad will happen. SpongeBob then fills the locker with appliances and mentions he expanded it a bit. When Squidward opens the locker to retrieve his clarinet before his performance, he discovers SpongeBob has transformed it into an impossibly large dimension. SpongeBob left notes directing Squidward to different drawer numbers that lead nowhere. Squidward crawls through a small hole and finds himself in a surreal forest of clarinets. An eagle creature appears, calling itself the keeper of the forest where clarinets live without persecution. The eagle swallows Squidward, saying he needs to learn respect. Squidward experiences increasingly nightmarish scenarios, mirror versions of himself playing clarinets at deafening volumes, falling into pinball machines, being chased through space. All while SpongeBob appears throughout laughing and running away with the clarinet. Squidward finally melts out of the locker. SpongeBob reveals he had Squidward's clarinet the entire time to keep it safe. SpongeBob didn't accidentally create a nightmare dimension. He deliberately engineered a psychological torture chamber specifically designed to torment Squidward, then claimed it was protective custody. The episode establishes critical context at the beginning. Squidward is unusually cheerful because he has a clarinet recital immediately after work. He endures multiple indignities while maintaining his good mood, getting hit with a door, dealing with screeching sounds, customers with bad breath. When a baby drools directly onto his clarinet, Squidward finally snaps and demands secure storage for his instrument. Mr. Krabs reluctantly provides an Old Navy locker containing a skeleton. Squidward must share it with SpongeBob due to labor regulations. SpongeBob hears all of this, including how important the recital is and how desperately Squidward needs to protect his clarinet. This information becomes weaponized. SpongeBob knows exactly what matters most to Squidward and engineers a scenario that targets that specific vulnerability. SpongeBob's modifications to the locker reveal premeditation. He installs velvet lining, brings massive appliances, and creates a card catalog filing system. When Squidward questions this, SpongeBob dismisses him and returns to work. The elaborate organization serves no practical purpose for a simple storage locker. Its only function is creating bureaucratic complexity that forces Squidward to navigate an unnecessarily complicated system to access his own property. SpongeBob is manufacturing dependency while establishing plausible deniability. If questioned, he was just being helpful and organized. The truth reveals itself when Squidward actually tries retrieving his clarinet and discovers the locker has become dimensionally impossible. The Nightmare Dimension shows specific design choices that prove intentionality. Squidward finds notes directing him to drawer numbers in the thousands. These locations don't exist. The notes contain corrections, claiming SpongeBob made mistakes and providing new, incorrect numbers. This is deliberate misdirection designed to waste time and increase frustration. Squidward finally crawls through a small hole into a forest of clarinets where SpongeBob appears laughing while holding the clarinet just out of reach. SpongeBob runs away, forcing Squidward to chase him deeper into the dimension. This is psychological torture using operant conditioning. SpongeBob provides intermittent reinforcement by appearing with the clarinet then disappearing, training Squidward to keep searching despite never actually catching him. The eagle creature represents the most disturbing element of the dimension's construction. It interrogates Squidward about why he's there and challenges his claim of ownership over the clarinet. When Squidward insists he owns it, the eagle lectures him about how clarinets aren't owned and live free from persecution in this sacred space. The eagle then swallows Squidward as punishment for his disrespectful tone. This philosophical framework mirrors SpongeBob's worldview perfectly. SpongeBob constantly inserts himself into Squidward's life, claiming he's helping, while Squidward protests this violates boundaries. The eagle serves as SpongeBob's proxy, delivering the message that Squidward's desire for autonomy and ownership is morally wrong. The dimension lectures Squidward about his supposed character flaws, while actively preventing him from accessing his property. The mirror sequence escalates the psychological warfare. Squidward encounters reflections of himself that laugh wickedly, grab clarinets, shove them in their mouths, and play high-pitched notes directly at him, causing him to scream in pain. These aren't random nightmare images. They're weaponized versions of Squidward's own identity and passion turned against him. The mirrors force self-confrontation while making his beloved clarinet into an instrument of torture. Patrick's brief appearance in the pinball machine adds another layer. Patrick mentions pressure and flees in terror when the ground shakes. This suggests the dimension has internal physics and rules that even other victims recognize as dangerous. SpongeBob appears throughout all of this, laughing and running, demonstrating complete immunity to the environment that's destroying Squidward. When Squidward finally escapes, SpongeBob reveals he had the clarinet the entire time, claiming he kept it for safety given all the ruckus Squidward was making over it. This is gaslighting. SpongeBob created the ruckus by building an impossible dimension and hiding the clarinet. He sent Squidward searching for something he personally held while appearing throughout the nightmare laughing. He framed this deliberate torture as protective custody and blamed Squidward for being overly concerned about his instrument before an important performance. Squidward throws SpongeBob into the same locker and sends it on a bus to far, far away. At his recital, SpongeBob emerges from Squidward's clarinet case, having somehow traveled faster than the bus and arrived first. This proves SpongeBob controls the dimension. He's immune to its effects because he designed it. He ruined Squidward's recital by appearing at the worst moment, causing Squidward to flee in terror. The locker dimension represents SpongeBob's most sophisticated torture mechanism. He transformed mandatory shared storage into a personalized hell featuring Squidward's greatest fear, losing his clarinet before an important performance. He incorporated philosophical lectures about ownership, mirror-based psychological warfare, and endless searching for something he held the whole time. He appeared throughout laughing to maximize distress while maintaining complete control over the environment. When tested against himself, he emerged unharmed, having somehow outpaced conventional transportation. SpongeBob engineers torture chambers, sends people inside, then claims he was protecting them. The medical system used him as cleaning equipment. He uses dimensional manipulation as a weapon while performing innocence so effectively that even his victims question whether the torture was intentional or accidental. Let's keep the pace and move on to the next conspiracy. In episode Shanghaied, an anchor crashes through SpongeBob's house, connecting to the Flying Dutchman's ghost ship. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward climb aboard and get enslaved as eternal crew members according to the Ghost Rulebook. The Flying Dutchman assigns them haunting duties. Every single haunting attempt fails catastrophically because SpongeBob and Patrick sabotage them, doing finger tricks instead of scaring people, blowing bubbles during ghost appearances, skating in purple tights while the Dutchman tries frightening victims, and crashing the ship through rocks repeatedly while SpongeBob cheerfully narrates the destruction. When the Dutchman decides to eat them instead, they steal his dining sock and negotiate 3 wishes as ransom. Patrick immediately wastes the first wish, saying he wished they'd known about wishes earlier. SpongeBob wastes the second wish, bringing Squidward back from the Fly of Despair. SpongeBob gets the final wish and uses it to make the Dutchman vegetarian so he can't eat them. The Dutchman reveals he gets a wish too, and turns them into fruit in a blender that escapes, ensuring they're chased around the ship forever. SpongeBob didn't accidentally sabotage freedom. He deliberately ensured permanent entrapment because he views slavery as employment and refuses to leave any job. The episode establishes SpongeBob's perspective immediately when they board the ship. Squidward wants to file a complaint about the anchor damaging his house. SpongeBob blames Squidward for everything when the Dutchman gets angry. The Dutchman throws Squidward into the Fly of Despair, a dimensional torture prison. He asks if anyone else wants to enter. SpongeBob and Patrick immediately submit, saying they know their place now and will do anything he says. The Dutchman hands them a mop and bucket, ordering them to swab the deck. SpongeBob gets excited, yelling about having a real live ghost mop. Patrick celebrates getting a hat. They start singing a sailor song about how wonderful sailor life is. They've been enslaved for eternal servitude, and they're singing about how great it is. This reveals SpongeBob's fundamental psychology. He interprets forced labor as employment and employment as identity. The Dutchman explains they're heading to Bikini Bottom for a haunting spree and wants the ship to look scary. SpongeBob and Patrick get confused about whether he means good and scary, or so good it's scary, or so scary you forget it doesn't look good. The Dutchman just wants it to look scary with mold and bugs. SpongeBob asks if that means he doesn't want it to look good. The Dutchman yells at them to get moving. They've already demonstrated they'll deliberately misunderstand instructions to prolong interactions and avoid completing tasks. Later, the Dutchman howls like a wolf to set the seas ablaze with fear. SpongeBob bleats like a sheep. Patrick yodels. The Dutchman howls again. Patrick keeps interrupting him with yodeling. After awkward silence, the Dutchman gives up, saying that'll do. SpongeBob has been assigned to find victims using a spyglass. He spins it and it lands on a tough guy. The Dutchman nervously blows on it to make it point at a small child instead. They position the ship behind rocks. The haunting attempts reveal deliberate sabotage. The Dutchman jumps out, scaring the child, and announces they should prepare to be burdened by the haunting memory of his ghostly ghost pirates. He points to SpongeBob and Patrick, who look confused. SpongeBob asks if that was the signal and requests he do it again. The Dutchman repeats the line. SpongeBob comes out and does a finger trick. Patrick asks how he does that. The Dutchman tells them to get back on the ship. They respond that it's still a mystery. The child calls them dorks. The Dutchman agrees, but says they're his dorks. This pattern repeats. SpongeBob navigates the ship through rocks, saying, you're good," as it tears apart. The Dutchman tries scaring a woman by showing flames in his mouth, but SpongeBob blows bubbles and Patrick shakes a board, interrupting. The ship keeps getting wrecked as they navigate. The Dutchman goes through a wall to scare Larry, but SpongeBob and Patrick just slam into the wall, failing completely. The ship continues tearing up. The Dutchman scares Frank by rotating his head while SpongeBob and Patrick skate in purple tights. Every attempt fails because SpongeBob and Patrick actively prevent success while destroying the ship. Back in their bunk room, SpongeBob asks why the Dutchman wanted them to wait there. Patrick suggests maybe he's giving them a reward like movie passes or an oversized coffee mug. They start bouncing excitedly. The Dutchman enters and tells them to stop bouncing. They freeze instantly. He explains the crew for eternity thing isn't working out and he's just going to eat them instead. They scream. Patrick suggests leaving. SpongeBob points out the door is locked and the only way out is through the perfume department, a live-action shopping mall area. They run through getting sprayed with perfume continuously. Someone removes Patrick's gas mask and sprays him directly in the face. They exit exhausted. SpongeBob hears the Dutchman in his room reading his diary about eating them tomorrow with brown sauce and his dining sock. The Dutchman realizes the sock is gone and confronts them, demanding it back, saying he can't eat without it. SpongeBob refuses to return it. The Dutchman tries zapping him, but SpongeBob holds up the sock as protection. The sock starts tearing. The Dutchman panics about stretching the elastic. Patrick announces they've reached an impasse. This is the negotiation moment where they could secure freedom. The Dutchman offers 3 wishes in exchange for the sock. Patrick tries negotiating, asking for 5. The Dutchman offers 4. Patrick says 3, take it or leave it. Patrick just negotiated down from 5 to 3, showing he's as incompetent as SpongeBob. The Dutchman agrees to 3 wishes. SpongeBob celebrates having 3 wishes. Patrick immediately says he wishes they'd known that earlier. Time rewinds 5 minutes. The Dutchman announces they have 2 wishes left. Patrick wasted the first wish on nothing. SpongeBob remains cheerful, saying they still have 2 more. He declares he wishes Squidward were here to see this. Squidward appears, having been pulled from the Fly of Despair. SpongeBob realizes he just used the second wish. Squidward demands the last wish since SpongeBob got him back into this mess. Patrick argues it belongs to him because he didn't get a real wish. They argue until the Dutchman uses eeny, meeny, miny, mo to decide. It lands on SpongeBob. Squidward coaches SpongeBob to think about what wish would prevent them from being eaten. SpongeBob announces he's figured it out. He wishes the Dutchman was a vegetarian. The Dutchman transforms into a healthy, fit vegetarian holding celery. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward celebrate appearing back at SpongeBob's house. Patrick says SpongeBob saved them. The screen reveals their bodies have been turned into fruit. Squidward is a banana. SpongeBob is a strawberry. Patrick is grapes, and they're in a blender with other fruit. Squidward asks why they've been turned into fruit. The Dutchman appears chopping banana slices into the blender, explaining he gets a wish too and fruit prevents scurvy. They scream and bounce away in the blender. The Dutchman chases them around his ship, which has become a hippie-themed vehicle. SpongeBob's wish didn't free them. It ensured they'd be chased around the ship forever as fruit while the Dutchman pursues them in a blender. SpongeBob had one chance to wish for freedom and deliberately chose something that kept them trapped. SpongeBob spent the entire episode treating enslavement as employment. He sang songs about wonderful sailor life, celebrated getting a ghost mop, enthusiastically participated in every task while sabotaging actual success, and when finally given the power to escape, used it in a way that guaranteed permanent entrapment. He turned their slavery into a slightly different form of slavery, where they're fruit instead of crew but still aboard the ship being chased forever. SpongeBob cannot exist without external structure defining his purpose. He manufactured a scenario where freedom was technically possible through wishes, then systematically wasted all 3 wishes, ensuring they'd never leave. The Dutchman wanted to fire them because they were incompetent. SpongeBob refused to be fired by stealing leverage, then negotiating his way into a different eternal employment arrangement. He views being chased around a ship as fruit by a vegetarian ghost as preferable to going home, because at least it's a job. Now we're stepping into the next conspiracy. In episode No Free Rides, SpongeBob fails his driving test with negative 224 points. Mrs. Puff panics at having him for another year and gives him extra credit. Write a simple 10-word sentence. SpongeBob cannot complete this task despite it being absurdly easy. He sharpens his pencil repeatedly, has panic attacks, experiences hand cramping, and ultimately produces an incoherent paper with crossed-out words and drawings. Missus. Puff passes him anyway and gives him a license. That night, SpongeBob's parents surprise Mrs. Puff with a new boat as a gift for SpongeBob, thanking her for never giving up. Mrs. Puff has visions of SpongeBob causing mass destruction and decides to steal his boat. SpongeBob is sleeping inside the boat when she steals it. He wakes up during the theft, fights her, they crash into police, and Mrs. Puff gets arrested. From jail, Mrs. Puff apologizes for passing him when he wasn't ready. SpongeBob cheerfully announces the warden will release Mrs. Puff early if she provides free driving lessons. SpongeBob didn't accidentally trap Mrs. Puff in jail. He engineered her arrest by deliberately failing the extra credit, being in the boat at the exact moment of theft, and offering prison driving lessons that ensure Mrs. Puff remains his permanent teacher under legal obligation. The episode establishes SpongeBob's pattern immediately. He fails the driving test catastrophically with negative 224 points. When told the test is over, he insists there's enough time to make up the points and reverses the boat, causing more destruction. Mrs. Puff gives him a final score of 6. He needs 600 to pass. SpongeBob celebrates getting to be in her class for another whole year and sings about how it'll only take one more super-duper spectacular year. Mrs. Puff is still inflated from the crash, thinking about another year with him. She realizes she must use extra credit to save herself. She runs over, shaking SpongeBob in joy, explaining extra credit means getting credit for things he wasn't able to do before. She assigns him to write a 10-word sentence on what he learned in boating school. She helps him start with 7 words already written. He only needs 3 more words. SpongeBob begins writing, then his pencil snaps. He walks to the sharpener and sharpens it multiple times to get the right sharpness while Mrs. Puff sweats. He returns and the pencil breaks again. Mrs. Puff grabs it and hands him a pen. SpongeBob calls it one of the most permanent writing utensils and finishes the sentence. Mrs. Puff asks to see it. SpongeBob says he changed his mind and scribbles things out. Mrs. Puff insists it's fine. SpongeBob jumps on top of the paper, refusing to show her. Mrs. Puff yells that it's so simple, only 10 words. SpongeBob starts panting, saying it's too hot and his hand is cramping. Mrs. Puff jumps on him, forcing the pen to push on paper. The desk collapses. They fight over the paper and it rips. Mrs. Puff reads what remains, showing crossed-out words and pictures instead of a coherent sentence. She throws the pieces on the floor and passes him anyway. SpongeBob protests that he doesn't feel like he really did anything. Mrs. Puff drags him out the door, giving him his license. This scene proves SpongeBob is capable of complex thought, speech, and physical coordination. He can operate machinery, work a fry-cook job, and speak in complete sentences. He cannot write 3 simple words to complete a sentence. This is deliberate sabotage designed to force Mrs. Puff into fraudulent behavior. Mrs. Puff has visions of SpongeBob causing mass destruction on the roads. She reassures herself that he did extra credit and doesn't even have a boat to drive. That night, she walks home planning to eat pasta. She opens her door to find SpongeBob's parents with a huge cake saying, "Thank you, Mrs. Puff." SpongeBob's father thanks her for never giving up, never quitting, never taking the easy way out. The mother says they wanted to make sure Mrs. Puff was here to see this. They reveal a brand new boatmobile with license plate reading IMRDY. SpongeBob faints and hits the cake. The parents drive away with SpongeBob passed out in the back seat saying he'll be driving by tomorrow. Mrs. Puff realizes she'll be exposed for letting him slide through school. She says she'll have to move to a new city and start a new boating school with a new name, then says not again. This proves Mrs. Puff has fled cities before after similar incidents. SpongeBob's parents arriving with a boat immediately after he passes suggests they knew this would happen. They had the boat ready, the cake prepared, and showed up at her house that same night. This coordination implies SpongeBob told them in advance that Mrs. Puff would pass him fraudulently. That night, SpongeBob is in bed with his parents telling him to stay away from the boat. SpongeBob peeks out, slides through the window, and goes to his new boat. He talks to the boat saying it's cold and gives it his socks. He kisses the throttle lever and falls asleep inside the boat. Mrs. Puff appears wearing a black ski mask. She jumps into the boat, checking if the coast is clear. She starts the boat and drives off sitting on an asleep SpongeBob. He wakes up and sees the sky moving. They notice each other and scream. SpongeBob accuses her of being a boatjacker and pulls out pepper spray but sprays himself. Mrs. Puff kicks him out, saying it was for his own good. SpongeBob chases on his bike, catches up, and grabs onto the windshield. Mrs. Puff tries shaking him off. He gets dragged through giant clams, cheese graters, and educational television. He transforms into a radio in the car. They fight, the boat goes out of control, and crashes into a police car. This sequence reveals multiple suspicious elements. SpongeBob was sleeping in the boat despite his parents explicitly telling him to stay away from it. He positioned himself in the exact location where Mrs. Puff would sit when stealing it. He had pepper spray ready, implying he anticipated a theft. He survived impossible obstacles through cartoon physics, showing he controls reality itself. After the crash, SpongeBob calls Mrs. Puff from jail. Mrs. Puff apologizes, saying she shouldn't have passed him and he really wasn't ready. SpongeBob asks if he has to give his license back. Mrs. Puff mentions Mrs. Flounder is starting a new class Monday morning. SpongeBob says Mrs. Puff is the only teacher for him, and besides the warden will let Mrs. Puff go early if she does a favor. Mrs. Puff asks, what favor? SpongeBob announces free driving lessons and laughs. Mrs. Puff is now legally obligated to provide driving instruction to prisoners as a condition of her early release. This ensures SpongeBob maintains access to her as his permanent instructor. He engineered her arrest specifically to create legal leverage, requiring her continued teaching. Mrs. Puff cannot flee to another city because she's under criminal supervision. She cannot refuse to teach SpongeBob because he arranged her early release conditions. SpongeBob has trapped her in a permanent teacher-student relationship enforced by the criminal justice system. SpongeBob spent the episode demonstrating he's capable of complex tasks, chasing vehicles, surviving deadly obstacles, transforming his body, fighting adults, but completely incapable of writing 3 words. He forced Mrs. Puff into educational fraud by making it psychologically impossible for her to endure another year of legitimate instruction. He ensured his parents knew to buy a boat immediately and appear at her house that same night. He slept in the boat despite being told not to, positioning himself where the thief would sit. He had defensive weapons ready. He survived impossible scenarios to maintain his grip on the stolen vehicle. He crashed them into police, ensuring her arrest. He then offered prison driving lessons as the condition for her release, creating permanent legal obligation. SpongeBob didn't fail because he's incompetent. He failed because trapping Mrs. Puff as his eternal instructor requires maintaining the illusion of incompetence while demonstrating superhuman persistence and planning. He engineered her arrest to ensure she can never escape him. That's it for today. If you enjoyed our video today, subscribe to our channel.